In at number 10, Reed Richards. Not too many people view Reed Richards as a scary superhero, at least at face value. However, if you look into what he is truly capable of, you'll take a second glance real quick. Reed has one of the highest levels of intelligence in the MCU, yet despite this, many fans view him as more of a mad scientist than anything else. For example, the time that he and others cloned Thor and sent him to attack the Anti-Superhuman Registration Act heroes. That may sound like an act of defense, but in reality the clone was killing superheroes that were actually close friends of not just the Fantastic Four, but Reed Richards as well. On top of that, Mr. Fantastic's ability to convert the mass of his entire body into a highly malleable state at will could be used to do some pretty heinous things if he ever wanted to. Things we wouldn't wish on our worst enemies. In at number 9, the Inhumans. With all of these behind the scenes deals over ownership of certain heroes to be used for the big screen, many fans were disappointed to learn that essentially the bland Inhumans would be the new moniker for mutants in the MCU. This has led many fans to not help but think that the Inhumans are being crammed in our face in lieu of not getting the rights to the X-Men. The team appeared in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 2 and Marvel Comics Infinity and Inhumanity. It was here that it became apparent that the Inhumans should be viewed as a threat versus our salvation. When Thanos invaded Earth looking for his son Thane, the Inhuman leader Black Bolt unleashed massive clouds of Terrigen mist into the Earth's atmosphere. This mist soon settled into two enormous clouds that mixed with the atmosphere, transforming them into a substance that was toxic for all mutants. In at number 8, the Hulk. There are so many problems with the Hulk's character that it's difficult to pin down just a few for this point. First and foremost, this scary superhero has had a myriad of different actors attempt to properly portray the Green Machine, and just when you think they got it, boom, casting change. It's been years since the Hulk had his own solo film, and for good reason. The character was entirely absent when needed most in Avengers Infinity War, and then Endgame turned him into even more of a joke with his odd new hipster Hulk appearance. Regardless of how much fans hated this, the Hulk still remains as one of the more terrifying superheroes in the MCU. His power is virtually unmatched, and when his anger gets out of control, he only becomes harder to defeat. Not exactly a superhero that you'd want to double cross anytime soon. In at number 7, Iron Man. Besides the tired shtick that we've watched Tony Stark do over and over again throughout the MCU, it's his influence as a billionaire weapon manufacturer that makes him both hated and scary. The MCU attempted to move him away from his roots of creating weapons that ultimately land in the wrong hands, killing innocents, by making him more of a mentor for other heroes, but you can never undo the previous films. The cherry on top though was the spawning of Ultron, who took Stark's words for peace and showed us the true evil within those words, only the way that an unfeeling AI can do. The worst part is that in order to defeat this big mistake, he had to create Vision, yet another uncontrolled godlike entity that could have just as easily only made things worse. As smart as Tony Stark is, it's that enormous ego that people not only hate, but are scared of as well, and rightfully so. In at number 6, Shazam. For Billy Batson, it's not just his juvenile nature that audiences didn't care for, it's the fact that there has been a number of changes made to the character itself. People engaged in a heated debate online as to whether or not he was Shazam or Captain Marvel. Either way, he's like a goofy, uncoordinated Superman that just got his powers. Despite all of the name changes and general buffoonery, the character of Shazam is without a doubt scary. He's the ultimate what-if kind of character. I mean, they literally bestowed a teenager with divine empowerment and the physical stature of an adult. The result is absolute carelessness on the part of someone who probably never had to deal with such dire consequences for their actions in their entire life. Sure, he saved that bus full of people in the film, but he's also the one who caused the accident in the first place, making Shazam both hated and feared by those who ride the public transit system in Philadelphia. In at number 5, Green Lantern. Hal Jordan is by far no one's favorite Green Lantern. Everything from the dumb version of Frank Miller's All-Star Batman and Robin to the awful portrayal by Ryan Reynolds, fans have had quite the distaste for Green Lantern, leading many fans of DC to even dislike the Lego movie version of the character as well. He didn't even make the cut for Super Friends or the Justice League. That means his own friends had to save the world and opted for not calling him in. Even still, we should not forget how powerful Hal as the Green Lantern truly is. His Green Lantern ring mastery gives Hal the ability to bring anything into existence just from thinking about it. This could mean world-ending weapons appearing from nothing and being used in collaboration with his superhuman strength. As much as we dislike him, it's probably a good thing that he's on our side. In at number 4, Aquaman. Aquaman has been the center of internet and comic book fan scrutiny for years. With so many iterations of the character being drawn up and scrapped, fans have relentlessly mocked Aquaman. Jason Momoa's portrayal of the character added a few more layers, but what's worse than being a boring superhero is hating him for being so overpowered. Public service announcements about boating safety aside, the King of the Deep is one scary superhero. Despite being born half human, he has a real distrust and hatred for humans. He almost saves them as a way of proving that he's above them. In at number 3, Superman. Now here's a classic superhero that we would never ever want to get on the bad side of, yet regardless of the feats of strength that Kal-El has shown, he still gets a ton of hate. Zack Snyder's film portrayed him as the superhero who sort of knew that he was awesome but didn't owe humanity anything, and throughout the comic books his obnoxious rebrands have been the subject of much disdain. All of that aside, it's this boring label that he gets smacked with repeatedly that truly holds his character back. There isn't much complexity to the story of Superman, and because the majority of us understand his origins, we often take him for granted as a superhero. Even in Batman vs Superman, many fans wondered why exactly we needed this type of film and really what good it would do for his reputation. What we saw was that Superman is still a force to be reckoned with, and again, despite our hatred for, a superhero that we should constantly be in fear of. In at number 2, Ghost Rider. It wasn't just the fact that the Ghost Rider movie was played by Nicolas Cage that made fans hate the character, it was the watered down portrayal that truly upset the fans. Ghost Rider was a character designed for the express purpose of being this edgy R-rated superhero, but that's just not what we got. Even the sequel for the film felt like a cry for help. They just can't let him go, and for good reason. He's terrifying, and the battle of someone being controlled by an evil force but attempting to use it for good is an inherently compelling narrative. This is why we saw Marvel jump ship on the Johnny Blaze version and push forward in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. where we saw the Robbie Reyes version of the character making an appearance. Hopefully the new one will be better. Last but not least, in our number 1 spot, Cyclops. Scott Summers. Where do we even begin with this white bread, whiny, child-endangering superhero? I guess those last 3 remarks are a good place to start. In the eyes of some fans, Cyclops is their favorite team leader, but for many his creepy flirting with teenage Jean Grey was enough for fans to, well, hate his guts. As a result, Scott has been the center and main recipient of a ton of backlash from comic book fans. All of that hatred aside though, Cyclops is without a doubt scary powerful. His optic blasts have gone haywire before, and when he's not leveling cities with his eyes alone, he can be quite the jerk. His bland nature would never make him complex enough to become a villain, but even if he did, I bet his motivations for destroying the world would be Wolverine swooping up his lady.
Number 10, Superman and Ultraman. Ultraman is Superman's evil version from Earth 3. Ultraman first appeared in Justice League of America number 29 in 1964. The whole theme of this universe is that roles are flipped on their heads. The villains are heroes and the heroes are villains. So when Supes ran into an evil version of himself, you can guess he wasn't too happy. Not to mention that this version was also cheated on by his wife, this Earth's Lois Lane, with both Batman and the Lex Luthor of this universe. Ultraman gets his powers from kryptonite, which is obviously going to cause some issues for Superman, who gets weakened by kryptonite, obviously. So if Ultraman always has some on him, Supes is screwed. Ultraman also used to gain a new ability for each exposure to kryptonite. If you thought Superman was overpowered, look at this guy. Ultraman and Superman have had a few encounters over the years. Ultraman even teamed up with the Lex Luthor of Earth 1 and 2 to take down their Supermen. But the Supermen were assisted by the heroic Lex of Earth 3. This is a mishmash and there is literally 2 different people. This is confusing, man. Multiverses, am I right? What about airplane food? Number 9, Captain America and the Grand Director. Captain America and the Grand Director have a complicated history. We all know how Cap was frozen after a battle in 1945 as revealed in Avengers number 4, but this wasn't always the case. Cap had a run in 1953 starting in Young Men number 24 and ending in May of 1954. The story showed Cap and Bucky as both superheroes and civilians, and it was clearly set in the 1950s, so how is this possible? If Cap was frozen until the 1960s, how is he getting plums with Bucky in 1950? Well, it simply wasn't the original Captain America. The 1950s era Cap was given other names to distinguish himself from his original counterpart, one of these being the Grand Director, his birth name being revealed in Captain America number 602, William Burnside. William idolized Cap to a point of obsession, like Professor Zoom to the Flash. The government sets him up as a teacher, but he wanted to be Cap, and had the formula to do so. So when Red Skull Supergirl ironically attacks the United Nations, William injects himself and goes into action. However, the formula he had was slightly flawed and ended up giving him psychotic symptoms. Throw some future brainwash in there too to have him become one of Cap's greatest villains. Number 8. Adam Warlock and Magus. There have been 3 different versions of Magus throughout the years. All of them are the dark side of Adam Warlock. The original Magus is an older, evil Adam who traveled to the past and rules over a religion called the Universal Church of Truth, and in a Flash Season 3 move wants to ensure his creation by guiding Adam down a series of steps to end up creating himself. But with the help of Thanos, Adam is able to destroy the Magus timeline, but he isn't rid of him yet. When Warlock retrieves the Infinity Gauntlet, he separated the good and bad parts of himself. The evil half names himself Magus and attempts to steal the gauntlet for himself. Adam is able to trap him in the Soul Gem, however. Adam himself becomes the third Magus when he attempts to repair the space-time continuum. This version is killed but resurrected as a child by the Church of Truth, but then is imprisoned by the Annihilators. Number 7. Hulk and Maestro. What's with people fighting future versions of themselves? In the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect, we see Hulk brought 100 years into the future, where a nuclear war has raged and has nearly killed everyone on the planet. The future Hulk, known as Maestro, has been driven insane by constant radiation absorption and his continued treatment as a green monster. He has the intelligence of Bruce Banner, but has the strength and ideals of the Hulk. While Hulk is able to land a few good hits, Maestro is stronger due to the radiation and has more experience being from literally 100 years in the future. Maestro is able to snap Hulk's neck and decides to take him on a tour of the city. How romantic. Maestro is only defeated when Hulk is able to lure him back to the machine that brought him to the future, and Maestro is sent back to the moment the Hulk is created, appearing right next to the Gamma Bomb. It explodes and even the Hulk can't take that blast, absorbing radiation and gradually repairing himself. Number 6. Supergirl and Dark Supergirl. When Lex Luthor attempts to corrupt Supergirl using black kryptonite, he ends up creating a second, darker Supergirl. Due to prolonged kryptonite poisoning, this new Supergirl believed that her father sent her to Earth to kill her cousin Superman. This Supergirl also fought Lex Luthor, flying him to the moon and sending him flying through the walls of the Justice League Watchtower. There she also meets the Justice League and takes them down one by one. The battle between Supergirl and her dark version ranged from the moon to Gotham City. Dark Supergirl managed to switch their costumes, and it was only revealed who the real Supergirl was when Wonder Woman caught them both in her lasso of truth. The lasso was also able to merge the two back together because plot. Later, another version of Dark Supergirl is brought out, but that's just a manifestation of Kara's pain rather than an evil version. Number 5. Thor and Ragnarok. When the Superhuman Registration Act became law, causing all people with superhuman powers to register with the government, Tony Stark, Hank Pym, who was secretly a Skrull, and Reed Richards created a clone of Thor from a strand of hair Tony found when the Avengers first started. This clone, who was eventually called Ragnarok, attacked the Secret Avengers during the Civil War. He killed Goliath and was shut down. In the Thor Siege story arc, Ragnarok was told that the real Thor was living on Asgard, which just so happened to be floating above Oklahoma on Earth. Ragnarok flew off to go confront Thor since he believed his resolve was that of a true warrior, unlike Thor. Ultimately though, Thor killed Ragnarok, so I guess his resolve was stronger. And his hammer. Number 4. Batman and Owlman. Owlman is Batman's Earth 3 counterpart, just like Ultraman is Superman's. The first appearance of Owlman was in Justice League of America Volume 1 number 29 in 1964, and is the older brother of Earth 3's Bruce Wayne. Owlman's origins are similar to Batman but differ slightly. His mother and brother were killed by a cop when his father wouldn't go in for questioning. Owlman, Thomas Wayne Jr., escaped the crime scene with hoodlum Joe Chill. He grew up to be Owlman and became a master criminal and ally to the crime lord Gordon, Earth 3's James Gordon. While they met in the comics, they have also met in the animation. In Justice League Crisis on Two Earths, Owlman is trying to destroy the planet. Batman goes to defeat him and winds up doing it, sending Owlman to another planet, causing him to blow up with his bomb, and costing Earth 3's Flash his life. Yeah, but Batman doesn't kill people. Number 3. Superman and Clark Kent. While we can all come to the consensus that Superman 3 is not the best superhero movie, you can see the hatred the characters have for each other, and it's almost as much as we have for the movie. This movie from 1983 has Superman and Clark Kent splitting and becoming separate entities for a time. But while in a junkyard, Superman goes kinda batcrap crazy. When they separate, Superman immediately proceeds to pound on Clark, even going as far as trying to crush him. When Clark says, "I can give as good as I get," Superman tempts him, to which Clark pushes Superman into a vat of acid. What the hell? Do you not realize that the other is literally you? And that without them, you're only half a person? This scene is so confusing to me, I don't really understand. Superman tries to crush himself. What? Number 2. Sentry and the Void. The Void is the negative aspects of arguably the most powerful of all heroes, the Sentry. It is more of a force and can take any shape it chooses. When teasing the Sentry, it usually takes human form, however. Sentry is fighting a constant battle to keep the Void at bay, and it comes into being every time he uses his powers. Sentry has even gone as far as wiping the memories of everyone on Earth as well as his own. When he gains his memories back, he can feel the Void returning, going to Manhattan for help. He begins remembering, and Sentry decides that the only way to stop the Void is by doing the same thing again, and with the help of Reed Richards, they reactivate the Watchtower and wipe everyone's memories again. Having the whole world forget about you, including yourself, is a mighty big price to pay. Or maybe it's not, because, I mean, you don't remember it yourself, so is anything really lost? Number 1. Future Flash and the Flash. 20 years from now, Barry Allen is blaming himself for the death of Wally West, since he, along with the Reverse Flash and Gorilla Grodd, had caused a tear in the Speed Force, making Barry lose time and making him not available when he was needed most. This causes him to go on a killing spree, killing the rogues to gain enough speed to travel back in time and correct his mistakes, because that's worked so well in the past. He kills Gorilla Grodd with a bomb that he plants inside of him, and this causes him to travel a dark path. He goes back in time, correcting things he wishes he could have prevented, meeting Mirror Master and preventing hostages from dying due to an earthquake. He drops the Trickster from a building only to have Axel's robots catch him, to which he is about to send them to their doom. That would have resulted in the death of a family, driving the Trickster to kill himself. The Trickster takes him up on the offer of redemption, and the Future Flash zooms away, no pun intended. The Future Flash then heads to kill Daniel West, tearing his head from his body just in time to prevent the accident that killed Wally. He then fights that version of himself and cripples him, knowing that he's going to go even earlier. He then arrives at the present. The Future Flash reveals that he wants to sacrifice the present day Barry Allen to close the Speed Force tear. But a future Wally West arrives, causing the Future Flash to fight both of them, ultimately killing them. He then remains in that time, trapped, and attempts to rebuild his future. You killed Wally when you were trying to save him, what the hell? There is nothing worse than sacrificing a past version of yourself because you're mad at them. Like, what? Does that even make sense?
Number 10. Galahad from Insufferable. Insufferable is a digital comic from 2012 written by Mark Waid that was meant to showcase the power of digital, that a comic could be digital only and flourish. This did not happen, it actually did get a trade paperback release. And Insufferable slipped under the radar for many people, and digital in general has plateaued. However, what was it about? Well, it was about a father and son dynamic duo team who had had a massive public falling out, wherein their secret identities were revealed. Galahad was fulfilling the role of Boy Wonder, and used the super identity reveal that he caused to catapult himself to social media fame. Galahad is big on the Twitter. He's on forums, he stays up late arguing with trolls, he lets his dad do the legwork solving crimes, shows up, takes a selfie and claims he did all of it himself on social media, or at least that his dad is old and in the way. He sells merch and gets sponsorship deals, and as you can imagine, eventually he gets a Twitter mob turning against him. This is when he has just run into bad press, and also a bit of a stint of being an ineffectual hero. Galahad is a brat, more concerned with branding himself and stopping crime. For those who see through his facade and call him out, he does deserve some of the hate he gets. Most of it. He's low on the list because he's relatively harmless, more lame than anything else. Number 9. Crackerjack. We're heading back to Astro City. Yes, it's all happening. Crackerjack first appears in Astro City number 5, and it's instantly set up as a hero that others are annoyed with. Flamboyant and flashy, he loves to swoop into a situation and take all the credit, even though sometimes he's more of a hindrance than a help. The thing is, the public likes him. He's gregarious and charming, but behind the scenes it's said that, and I quote, he depends on luck, he is jealous of others, he does sloppy work, he steals credit for the achievements of others. Harsh. No one seems to know who Crackerjack really is. His superhero identity takes up much of his persona. His arc culminates in him being career-endingly injured in the process of teaming up with one of Astro City's enemies to attempt to bolster his failing body, as he was starting to age out of the hero business after being active for over 20 years. Teaming up with an enemy for one's own selfish reasons didn't endear him to all the heroes, though some did understand. He's still the same Ray he always was though, and is working to recover from his injuries with the help of Quarrel, who he still hasn't told his name to. So yeah, does he deserve the hate? Sorta. Kind of. Most of the time. Most of the time lands you at number 9. Number 8. Damian Wayne. Controversial, I know, and I can feel the keys. How dare you. Damian Wayne's the GOAT. Well, here's the thing. Damian Wayne ranges a lot based on how he's written, and in canon there are many who can't stand him, or have to put up with him in a kind of, oh, Damian, what a precocious child, calling women trollops and whores, belittling his father father for his own rape, kidnapping Superboy even though they become good friends, and that was a very cute comic. He takes his father's paranoia to a whole new level, and just in general is rude to everyone. Damian is not as hated as he would be by the other heroes because he is a child, so he gets a lot of leeway and the potential to grow out of it, which he sometimes does until a writer decides to take him back to base. Damian is constantly being forced to learn to get along with others, thanks to his upbringing with Raish and Talia and the League of Assassins. To say he's antisocial would be an understatement, though a lot of it does stem from a place of insecurity. Damian is constantly mean to those around him, no matter how much they help or go to the mat for him. They give him infinite chances though, but for those who give up and give in to the hate, it's not that undeserved. Yes, he's 13, I'm aware. All I'm saying is those futures where he turns out evil, I believe. Still, I hold out hope for good writers and nuanced portrayals. It happens. Let's just stay away from the Damian who tells his father to cover his drink. That's disgusting. Number 7. Emma Frost. Now, Emma Frost started off her comic career as a villain, first debuting in the Uncanny X-Men number 129 back in 1980. She was the White Queen of the Hellfire Club. She eventually would end up joining and leading the X-Men for a bit. Here's the thing, now the X-Men have a better track record at this than other teams, but villains, reformed or otherwise, can be a hard sell for everyone to trust. She is also just as devious as her other half can be. Her and Cyclops were well matched. She lied about how he died in order for the mutants to declare war on the Inhumans, and while her methods don't always line up with the rest of the X-Men, she even reassumed control of the Hellfire Club in order to fix mutant kind her own way. But now it's House of X, or as some are arguing House of 10, hashtag House of X. We'll see how things shake up. Emma is hated for the lies, for the lack of trust, and her willingness to go back to her old ways, and use people to her own end. I love Emma, but some of the hate deserved. Number 6. Omni-Man. We're heading over to Robert Kirkman's indie mega comic Invincible for this number. Omni-Man appears in the first issue of Invincible and is the father of the lead, Mark Grayson. Omni-Man is the Superman amalgam of this universe, the hero. He comes from another planet, heralding a mission of peace and prosperity. He married a human woman and had a son, is part of a league of heroes and seeks to keep the world safe, or so it seemed. It turned out in a twist that occurred several issues in that Omni-Man had not been sent to improve the Earth but to conquer it. He bred with an Earth woman to create an heir and equal to help him in his conquest. And when it is revealed, he goes and kills most of the Earth's top tier heroes. This obviously turns the planet's population and the remaining heroes against him, including his own son, who would go on to have quite a complex relationship with him. So yeah, turning on the planet you claimed you were protecting? Hate deserved. Number 5. Professor X. Professor X has veered quite widely from the character he was when he first debuted back in the X-Men number 1 back in 1963. Since then, he has amassed a whole host of questionable actions. It's been revealed that he's repressed memories, hidden the sentience of the Danger Room, mind-wiped people like erasing Magneto and creating Onslaught through the activation of the dark portions of his mind, being part of secret clandestine dealings. Over the years, a lot of his students or allies have come to hate him because of the lies and breaches in trust, compounded by the image he presents of himself, which can come across to some people as holier than thou. Xavier now goes by X, as he is Charles's mind and Phantom X's body. This is following some Shadow King shenanigans. Honestly, these betrayals cut deep, and for those who do hate him, it makes sense. No judgment here. Number 4. The Homelander. That's right, the boys. So this applies to comic Homelander and TV series Homelander, who both abuse their power quite a bit in different ways, but heinous ones. The Homelander is an arrogant, self-centered, false hero. He is manipulative, and for those who know who he really is, the hate is deserved. To find out, your heroes are sexual predators, murderers, cold, calculating cynics more interested in making a profit than helping, are untrained and regularly cause deaths because, well, yeah, that's a lot of reasons to hate. And maybe for some to form some kind of secret team to keep an eye on them. The Homelander may be a bit more sympathetic in the series, a tiny bit, just a smidge, but he still deserves most of the hate he gets. Pretty much all of it. Number 3. Cyclops. So a lot of you are quite salty that Cyclops wasn't on part 1, like it was a travesty. So Cyclops, what a journey. Now I like Cyclops, but he is a jerk. But that's part of what makes him interesting, to me at least. Cyclops was one of the original members of the X-Men and the de facto leader for a lot of the points of the team's history. Here's the thing, Cyclops takes an antagonistic approach to leadership. The person you set yourself up against a lot of times rather than the person you are inspired by. This results in him oftentimes being cold and not that empathetic. Add to that his rigidness and desire to please authority figures, and he has a lot of traits people dislike in real life, and it also comes across in the comics. Then as it went on, Cyclops, oh boy, he's gotten pretty dictatorial and sanctioned all kinds of things, is willing to separate kids from parents, and on the whole has just become someone you need to walk on eggshells around. There's a base this line of Cyclops from lots of people within the Marvel Universe, and as much as I like him, it makes complete sense. But you need characters like that. It's an interesting contrast. You're definitely not gonna forget Cyclops anytime soon. The fictional world needs a jerk or two. Number 2, Batman. Now I love Batman, many people do, but in universe he has his detractors, especially modern post-identity crisis Batman, which is when canonically you started to see a real shift towards paranoid contingency plan Batman. There have been numerous plots about Batman having a plan to take down his allies. Most notable is Tower of Babel. Everyone else here on staff says Babel, and now I live in a world of uncertainty. Batman is tracking people, friend and foe alike. He will go out of his way to defend his enemies, even the Joker, and this has not endeared him to people. Such as the plot where Batman argued that the Joker shouldn't be executed. How do you think Commissioner Gordon felt about that? Let's not even visit Jason. He's at home flipping a table. Even Nightwing hated him for a while after he fired him from being Robin and replaced him very quickly after with Jason. Guy hates him, one punch and all that. To some of his allies, he's an uptight, paranoid stick in the mud, and they worry that one day he could snap, which he also has a contingency plan for. Batman is complicated, but I'm a sucker for him. What can I say? Give me all the Bat Dad. I'm basic. It's fine. Where's my pumpkin spice? Don't get triggered. Enough of us love Batman to make up for the people in canon who hate him. Number 1, the Plutonian. We're going indie for number 1. We're looking at Irredeemable, an entire series dealing with the breakdown of this title hero. The Plutonian is a dark look at what could have been if Superman had not had the temperament to be a hero, coupled with a series of unfortunate events happening to him, such as revealing his secret identity to his lady love, only for her to reject him and spread his identity to the whole world, destroying his life and forcing him even further into isolation. The Plutonian ends up going on a killing spree, destroying the world's heroes and innocents alike. In fact, the title is a hint to the fact that he has become irredeemable. While they do a good job exploring how this all happened, for those who hate the Plutonian, it makes perfect sense. He's terrifying. Superhearing was a part of all this. I warned you all about the superhero.
Coming in at number 10 is Deadpool. Deadpool is a bit of a shocking way to kick off this list. He himself is like almost a mutant, but not actually a mutant, but he also says he's a mutant, but is then corrected by the actual mutants, and then sometimes people classify him as a mutant, but then others will classify him as not one. Do you understand why it's a little confusing? His mutant healing factor was derived from Wolverine's own, and he became who he is thanks to Weapon X, which are notorious for working on mutants. But whether he is a mutant or not, one thing is definitely true. Despite the fact that Wade has tried to count himself among their numbers, Deadpool finds the X-Men to just be a little too annoying for his own tastes. And that feeling basically just stems from the fact that they take things way too seriously, where he takes almost nothing seriously, which means when he does work with them, it's usually not for a very long time. To say Deadpool hates anyone feels kind of wrong. I think he's just kind of insane, but he definitely finds them annoying. Number 9, Black Bolt. The Inhumans are essentially a species of mutants created by the Kree experimenting on humans a long time ago. One of the ways the Inhumans came to be was through the Terrigen Mists. When they're exposed to the mists, they gained powers and they would become an Inhuman. Unfortunately, a cloud of Terrigen Mists found its way to Earth, and it turns out that these mists are incredibly deadly for the mutant population. The mutants eventually learned that they could change the composition of the mist in order to make it safe for mutants, but at the cost of not creating more Inhumans. The problem is, it didn't actually make sure that was okay to do with the Inhumans. They just started attacking the Inhumans, causing a conflict and causing Black Bolt to use his Scream to take down Cyclops. This resulted in Emma Frost using Dazzler to attack Black Bolt and leave him imprisoned in limbo and without the ability to use his powers. The worst part is that if the X-Men just talked to the Inhumans, which they eventually do, the Inhumans are totally cool with figuring out a resolution. So I'm kind of on Black Bolt's side with this one. Look, I definitely know some of these choices will split people's opinions, so this is a perfect opportunity to invite you down to the comments to make sure you let me know your thoughts on my opinions here. I'm giving you my takes with examples, so I'd love to hear your well-informed opinions. Coming in at number 8 is Blade. Blade is someone who sometimes feels like he's relegated to his own corner of the Marvel Universe, a fact that he and mutants technically kind of share. But Blade is also pretty damn ruthless. His main self-appointed purpose in life is to eradicate vampires. It's what he lives for. But when one of those vampires is also a mutant, then it causes some discourse. During the X-Men Curse of the Mutants, the X-Men, and more specifically Cyclops, asked this vampire slayer for his expertise and assistance in dealing with their vampire problem. When the depowered mutant Jubilee was turned into a vampire though, Blade wanted to exterminate her, straight up, which shouldn't have been a surprise to anyone. But Blade also shouldn't have been surprised that the X-Men were not down for this course of action. The disagreement may not have been Blade hates the X-Men, but going to a vampire slayer and expecting him not to do what he does is a little annoying, don't you think? I think so. Number 7, Wasp. Look, you may not agree with me on this one, and that's fine. But I will source one point of evidence that Wasp does not have a favorable view of the X-Men and mutants in general. In Uncanny Avengers, which followed the X-Men vs. Avengers arc and ended with the passing of Xavier at the hands of Cyclops, Captain America decided that the best way to repair things was to put more mutants onto the Avengers and have the new team, led by Alex Summers, Havoc. That's Cap cherry-picking the best-looking mutants to represent them, but the addition of a few mutants to the Avengers under the ideology of a Professor X meant that some things changed around the Avengers mansion. Like when Rogue tried to replace a painting of the original Avengers with a painting of Xavier. It's in a bit of poor taste, sure, but when Wasp walked in on it happening, she was more than a little upset. And it seemed genuinely anti-mutant to me, just a little bit. And then she had this whole weird thing where she tried to design an X-Men themed clothing brand, including Cyclops themed glasses that seemed in poor taste, to help fund the Avengers. And she referred to UX types as being depressing and not optimistic. Then in issue number 8 of that series, she makes another comment about the quote X-Men types and how they are keeping secrets. She just makes all these little snide comments about the mutant members of the team. She definitely has some kind of hate going on here. I don't care what you say, it's true. Wasp acts like all mutants are superheroes, for sure, but superheroes who don't know what they're doing, and that's rude. Number 6, Captain America. Captain America does not hate mutants. He stands against inequality, it's one of his things, fighting for the little guy. But gosh darn it, he sure seems to not care about them or their cause. Captain America and the Avengers in general don't usually think of the whole race of mutants when they make decisions, and that often leads to catastrophic events. A prime example being Avengers vs. X-Men. The X-Men knew from the very beginning that the Phoenix Force was coming to join with Hope Summers to revive the mutant species, and that if it didn't find Hope, it would destroy the Earth. They knew this because the mutant Cable went to the future, where the Avengers had succeeded in quote protecting Hope from the Phoenix Force, and it was bad. Cyclops made this pretty clear to Captain America and the Avengers, but they didn't trust the X-Men, this group of powerful mutants with decades of experience with the Phoenix Force, and who have hosts of the Phoenix Force among their ranks. The subconscious anti-mutant prejudice that Cap holds, coupled with his self-righteousness, causes him to not trust mutants and to think that he knows better than them. It's subtle for sure, but it's there all the same. Captain America has been at the center of many debates due to his willful negligence in regards to the mutant struggle. He doesn't hate mutants, but he also takes no noticeable action in their favor, nor does he like it when the X-Men threaten to overturn the current peace, even if it's for the betterment of their own species. But he does create the Unity Squad, so there's that. Number 5, Hawkeye. Look, Hawkeye is kinda just a bit of a jerk to everyone. And it makes a tiny bit of sense since he's constantly playing the compensation game with everyone else, since he's just a guy with a bow and an arrow. But man, does he say some problematic anti-mutant garbage sometimes. In Secret Wars, for example, without showing any anti-mutant sentiment before, Hawkeye grabs Cyclops by the scruff of his shirt and screams in his face, "You mutants stick together, huh? Well, sticking to a blood-soaked maniac like him doesn't speak well of you, pal." He was referring to Magneto, and well, fair point, Hawkeye, but what's all this "you mutants" talk? Look, I'm reaching for this one for sure, but in the Ultimate Universe, this sentiment is actually a bit more noticeable, and Hawkeye is certainly more of a jerk in general there. And he even took glee in taking out multiples of Multiple Man, although that was most likely because he was grieving. Look, just let me have this one, okay? Number 4, Scarlet Witch. The Scarlet Witch is another unique choice for this list, as she herself is indeed a mutant. But it's the fact that she is a mutant that is why she is on this list in the first place. It is a gross understatement to say that Wanda has not had the easiest life. Being an Avenger for years, the team that she has always been more inclined to anyways, this mutant saved the world on many occasions, but the end of the Scarlet Witch's marriage to Vision and the loss of her children caused a mental breakdown. A breakdown that, coupled with her reality reality warping capabilities caused the passing of a number of Avengers. Once the heroes decided that she needed to be dealt with, she warped reality to a world where Magneto was in charge of everything. But in the climax of that story, Wanda, in an extremely emotional moment, basically revealed her hate for mutants stemmed from the fact that being one has caused her so much pain and grief. She hated herself for being a mutant, and with 3 words, she then relieved almost all the mutants on Earth of their mutant abilities, putting the entire race into endangerment. Number 3. Tony Stark. Tony Stark, Iron Man, is on this list for an extremely similar reason to Captain America. As one of the leading men in the non-mutant superhero community, he makes some rather interesting decisions with some pretty selfish intent. Just like Captain America, I wouldn't say that Tony hates mutants or the X-Men, but I would say that he is usually ignorant to the horror which the X-Men have had to endure solely for being born different. For Tony, his example of not caring comes from the superhuman Civil War. Iron Man attempted to recruit the X-Men during Civil War, and Emma Frost rightly pointed out that the Avengers did absolutely nothing when Genosha was attacked by the Sentinels. 16 million mutants passed away, and the other heroes, Iron Man included, were almost nowhere to be found. But the bigger elephant in the room is that the act that Tony is even supporting in his Civil War is the Superhuman Registration Act, which itself was just an evolution of the Mutant Registration Act that purposefully segregated mutants for being who they were born to be. Tony didn't really care about that. He cared about having powerful pawns on his side. He would rather have them on his side since they are useful to keep around, but he doesn't actually care about their struggle, and he doesn't even fully trust them. Also, an imposter Tony Stark called them all filthy muties once, so there's that. Number 2. Reed Richards. Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four is not overtly a mutant or X-Men hater. The Fantastic Four that he is arguably the leader of have done their time and earned their place among the whole superhuman community, including among the mutants, as the Fantastic Four were one of the few groups who actively showed support of mutants, even if they didn't really know the best way to do so. But despite that, when things get personal, people's true colors come out for all to see. Reed may have not overtly said he hates mutants, but when it was revealed that Franklin Richards, his son, was actually a mutant, Reed then implanted a mutant nullifier into his own kid. He tried to fix Franklin despite the fact that he didn't try to do that when Franklin was not a mutant. I'd say that is pretty highly suspicious, and Susan Richards would probably agree with me. The people of the internet think this may have played a part in her trying to shack up with Namor. The worst part is Franklin wasn't actually a mutant. He just subconsciously used his vast powers to give himself an X gene. Reed needs to check himself. And finally, in at number 1, the Eternals. This may be a bit of an interesting choice. The hate for the X-Men here is almost an involuntary thing. So the Eternals, a celestial created experiment and offshoot of humanity, have an eternal struggle against another offshoot, the Deviants. Eternals have hardwired programming to protect the Celestials and to correct access deviation. A recent revelation about mutants and deviants causes the new Eternal leader, a pretty sinister guy by the name of Druig, to decide that the mutants represented excess deviation. Thanks to that, war is declared on all mutants, including obviously the X-Men. Following their programming, Eternal assassins come to Krakoa to destroy the Five. Massive war machine Eternals called the Hex are unleashed on Krakoa. Uranos, one of the oldest and nastiest of the Eternals, is unleashed on Arakko, and millions of mutants are taken out by the Eternals and their war machines. Now, to be totally fair, not all Eternals are on board with that. The main heroic Eternals like Thena and Icarus and Ajak and Makari split themselves off as separate Eternal factions trying to fix the situation, and when it reaches its crazy huge penultimate climax, things do go back to a bit of a normalcy, but for a while, their Eternals tried to wipe out the mutants simply for existing.
Number 10. Black Widow and the Invisible Woman. Starting off our list with something new and mild from the Invisible Woman solo series. This recasts her past as a secret agent. So before she married Reed, she worked for S.H.I.E.L.D. and ran covert ops, which with her power set actually makes a lot of sense. The story thus far is that her past partner has gone missing and she's gonna break all the rules to go behind enemy lines to find him. This involves her teaming up with Black Widow, who suddenly has a massive chip on her shoulder about superheroes. So Sue has to prove prove herself to her. She has to prove that she's not like other superheroes. Natasha, are you okay? You've been on so many superhero teams. I know you're a clone, but you have all the memories of the other Nat, who Hydra Cap killed. So these two just have beef until Sue proves herself to her by faking a drinking contest. So it's low, because it's not full hate or sustained, but it's odd. This is a 5-issue mini, by the way. It's pretty good. Check it out if you have the time. This is manufactured conflict. Manufactured conflict is manufactured. Does Nat not remember the time Sue fought the entire Avengers team to a standstill after the government took her kids and forced them out of the Baxter building? Reed's just noped out of that. He knows better than to try and stop an angry Sue. Number 9. Hal Jordan and Batman. So Green Lantern and Batman, since they started teaming up in the late Silver Age, Brave and the Bold, there has been friction. Batman has never fully appreciated Hal's attitude, which ranges from cavalier to I'm doing exactly what the Guardians tell me. But this really came to a head when Hal went evil. And also there's some beef from Hal's side from the time he was desperate enough to go to Bruce for help with his alcoholism and just got turned away. Post Parallax, Bruce wanted nothing to do with Spectre Hal and didn't trust him at all. And when he came back to life, he still didn't trust him and then got extra mad because everybody judged him for it. But honestly, he had good reason. Just because all the people you killed came back to life doesn't mean you didn't kill them in the first place. Eventually these two would find an even keel through an, in my opinion, contrived sequence where Bruce couldn't handle a power ring despite having wielded one multiple times before. All of this ended up being shifted more into frenemy mode in the New 52, where all of a sudden these two were all about each other. Bruce revealed his identity on purpose to Hal first, he lets Hal fly him places. I don't know, I have questions. I notice things. Other people are like, oh, where's Darkseid? And I'm like, is Hal's hand around Bruce's waist? Enhance image. No shame in my game. We all make our own fun. Number 8. Hawkman and Green Arrow. So Carter Hall and Oliver Queen hate each other for the same reason that Hal and Ollie should hate each other, but the comics insist they don't. A fundamental difference of opinion. Green Arrow leans really left, to the point where he just yells at Hal, for example, for being a space cop and for listening to the Guardians, ever. He just yells at him and calls him stupid and a stick in the mud, all kinds of things, but they're best friends? Like, what is going on with Hal's self-esteem? You don't have to take that. Anyway, Hawkman leans more right. These terminologies are stateside ones, by the way. These terms mean different things depending upon where you are in the world. So these two butt heads, or they did pre-Flashpoint. Post-Flashpoint in the New 52, except we mostly forget this was a thing. These two used to have some huge blow-up arguments. It's mostly been forgotten because of the struggle of what do we do with these characters in the first place. Just never forget, Oliver Queen will scream in your face if you have a different opinion than him on social issues, but when push comes to shove and he finds out his ward is a drug addict, he will slap him across the face and kick him out. So, all talk, huh? Number 7. Jean Grey and Emma Frost. This comes to us from New X-Men, the Grant Morrison run. And the genesis of this one, we've talked about it numerous times at this point. Jean and Cyclops were having problems. Emma, fresh off surviving the Genoshan genocide, started giving him psychic therapy. During this point, the two started having a psychic affair, an affair where she would masquerade as Jean as the Phoenix. It was all kinda messed up. So when Jean found out about all this, she was understandably upset. Less understandably, she psychically tortured Emma because of it. When Jean lets her powers go, she's terrifying. Full stop. Anybody who questions how she uses them has a long history to call back upon. This conflict would be solved through plot convenience. Jean would just kinda become the Phoenix and poof away. Now that description will bother some people who really felt the gravitas of her sacrifice, but different strokes for different folks. Maybe I'm Zorn. I was Zorn the whole time. Who wasn't Zorn but was Zorn. Number 6. Captain Marvel and Iron Man. This is Carol Danvers' Captain Marvel, who is currently having a villain arc in the comics at the time of this recording. A purposeful one, not one by accident. And it's a good play. Lean into it. Play with it, that's smart marketing. Anyway, despite years of friendship, her and Tony fell through over Minority Report. I mean, an Inhuman, Ulysses, who could tell the future. And when Rhodey died as a driving plot force, who was dating Carol at the time, it was on. She felt she could have prevented it if she knew the future. Tony was all, I don't agree. Also, I was the antagonist in the last Civil War. It's not a good look, don't do it. She was all, screw you. I'm starting a teenage Gestapo and getting several people killed. Get ready to be beaten into a coma, Care Bear. He calls her Care Bear, so I'm flipping it back. Yeah, this was intense. The Civil War arcs go hard. You go from fighting alongside someone to contemplating murdering them. However, unlike the first Civil War, they scrambled to undo any lasting character damage, so Tony just got over it. I built myself a new body, it's fine. Number 5. Namor and Black Panther. Two kings fighting over whose kingdom is better and who should have mastery. Also, they just really clash personality-wise. It takes a decent amount of ego to rule, and T'Challa handles his with more grace than Namor, who can at times fall into megalomania and just slips into straight-up villainy sometimes too. Still, these two can also respect each other. You can make their relationship fairly malleable. But well, they've fought for decades, and fans have a very let them fight mentality, alongside a who would win. Black Panther stabbed Namor that one time. Namor's been killed a few times actually. Beheaded by Hyperion once. Ouch. Number 4. Batman and the Red Hood. So this is a more one-sided hate, as when Jason Todd came back to life, Batman's feelings were very conflicted, but Jason had had years to nurse his hate, a festering rage that had started long before he died, exacerbated by seeing that his death had changed nothing in Bruce's methods, that he'd been replaced by another Robin, that the Joker still lived. Red Hood was more than happy to kill to accomplish what he felt Batman could not, and go up against the rest of the Bat family. It made him dangerous, as did the fact that Bruce still cared about him. Batman doesn't do feelings the best though, so the anger eventually manifested mutually. These days Jason is in more of a black sheep capacity, but these two still aren't good. Batman backhanded him that one time in Rebirth. Just why do people keep having him do that? Stop it. Number 3. Hawkeye and the Swordsman. Yeah, classic beef. So Hawkeye was a villain before he eventually had a change of heart. Now the Swordsman actually started off as a villain for Hawkeye. He had actually trained Hawkeye when the two were both villains. At that point he was called Trickshot, which is a better name. So when the Swordsman wanted to join the Avengers, obviously Clint didn't trust him and kept a close eye on him, which led to him being denied entry, which then led to him kidnapping Captain America. So yeah, hate justified. The Swordsman has been on the Avengers since though, so I guess he got what he wanted. Number 2. Reed Richards and Thor. So this occurred during the first Civil War, Civil War I. Thor was dead at this point, and so the pro-registration side felt that they needed something on their side, a big heavy hitter, some brawn. They needed some muscle. The Hulk was in space, kept there by them. This is leading up to Planet Hulk. So Reed thought, what if we just clone Thor? I have the tech, I have the DNA, I can do anything really. And Tony was like, yeah, go for it. This is why we're such good friends. Needless to say, when Thor found out about all this, he wasn't happy. He was furious. This messed up their relationship for a while, and justifiably so. Stop cloning people. Most people don't want to be cloned. Bad blood. Also, Thor didn't even want to be on that side, so double blow. Civil War. What a time. Both times. I can't wait for Civil War 3. Number 1. She-Hulk and Star Fox. So She-Hulk hates Star Fox for a couple of reasons, like influencing her emotions and making her believe she was in love with John Jameson, Werewolf Jameson, and so she married him. She found this out while she was trying to discover if Star Fox had used his powers on her to make her sleep with him. This was while she was defending him for his other rapes that he had committed canonically because Thanos implanted memories in him that made him doubt himself, but not even the real Thanos. It was not the strongest plot. Jen is justifiably angry about all of this, but also at herself because he didn't influence her in the defending of him or the sleeping with him department. She changed her whole life after finding out about her and John though. She divorced John. It hurt how she could perceive her own thoughts. I hate him too. Cupid powers showcased in the grossest way. This is the plot that for many ruins Star Fox, while others are like, it's the writer's fault, not Star Fox. Share your thoughts.
Number 10. Spider-Man and Deadpool. This may be a bromance to Deadpool, but for Spider-Man, this relationship is mostly a nuisance. The two do seem to share some sincere moments of feeling between them, like when Spider-Man and Deadpool bonded over talking about their incompleteness, the hole inside of them. But of course, Deadpool ruined this by offering to help Spider-Man with hole filling whenever need be. Yeah, most of their moments are like that. Wade aspires to be a good guy like Spider-Man, but he struggles. He's stuck with an anti-hero mentality, and it took a long time for Peter Parker to even accept that a murderer like Wade was capable of goodness. When Deadpool was hunting down a daily reporter from the Bugle, who was in the car with Peter at the time, Wilson just tossed Parker out of the car and off a bridge, without even thinking. Considering after that he may have just killed an innocent man. And when Parker returned in his Spider-Man guise to fight Deadpool, Deadpool claimed that he knew Spider-Man would be around to save that guy that he threw off the bridge, much to Parker's frustration. This one instance is a pretty good summation of what them fighting together is like, even when they're working on the same side. Number 9. Wolverine and Cyclops. These two often bump heads and really do not enjoy fighting with one another. They do it because they are a family, albeit a somewhat dysfunctional family. X-Men always have one another's backs, and Logan and Summers are no exception. So why don't they get along? Sometimes it has to do with the fact that they both love Jean, and that gets in the way of their friendship. But what it ultimately boils down to is that they are just different. Wolverine represents the brash and bold sort of tactics. He operates on instinct. He kills people. He goes feral and he has to be held back. Scott is usually perceived as being more strategic, the goody-goody. Wolverine's sort of stick in the mud in some cases. In some cases, many X-Men stick in the mud. The two don't really agree with each other's tactics, but still have respect for one another. Though that respect doesn't stop them from taking a dig at each other and arguing pretty much constantly. Number 8. Bishop and Gambit. Bishop comes from a future where the X-Men have been destroyed as a result of one of their own betraying them. He encounters a lone survivor of those events, which goes by the name of the Witness, but used to be known as LeBeau. Bishop believes the Witness is the betrayer, and upon traveling back in time and meeting Gambit, aka Remy LeBeau, that Gambit in turn is the Witness. Bishop attempts to warn the X-Men about Gambit, telling them that he will betray them, but they all seem pretty puzzled. They're like, he's probably not gonna betray us. Seems like a nice guy. The two work out their differences during their time fighting alongside each other, which all starts when Gambit has to come to Bishop's rescue after he's been captured by some villainous X-Men. You can check it out in the little series Gambit and Bishop, Sons of the Atom. It's actually pretty adorable to see these two different personalities come together. Like, Bishop originally just hates on Gambit, and then Gambit's like, I'll save you. It's really cute. Number 7. Bishop and Cable. Yeah, Bishop doesn't really get along with a lot of people. Maybe it's due to him being from the future, but in this case, Cable's also from the future, so These two get off on the wrong foot in the events of the Executioner's Song, where Bishop mistakes Cable as the person who made an assassination attempt on Charles Xavier by shooting him with a bullet that had the techno-organic virus in it. Both Bishop and Wolverine locate Cable and the three get into a fight, but eventually they all decide to work together to find Jean and Scott. Ultimately they discover that Strife is behind all of these evil shenanigans, Cable's evil clone, who is going on a villainous spree of torture and attacking others as punishment for slights they have made against him, even when these people don't seem to know what the heck he is talking about. Jean and Scott definitely don't know what he's talking about. Bishop and Cable later turn from frenemies to straight up enemies when they disagree on what should be done with Hope, who is the first mutant born after the events of House of M and Decimation. Number 6. Daredevil and Punisher. These two really don't enjoy working together when it comes to resolving issues. Namely that when it comes to dealing with criminals, Punisher believes he is above the law, where Daredevil, being a lawyer as his day job, still firmly believes in the law. Castle also straight up uses guns and kills people, and Daredevil just really badly beats them with his fighting sticks. The crazy thing is that both are quite violent, both are against crime, but that final decision in regards to what to do with a criminal means they don't usually like working together, unless they have to. Number 5. Batman and Green Lanterns. While it has been insinuated in the comics that Batman has an issue with all Green Lanterns, I'm not sure that's actually true. It was coming from Guy Gardner, so I'm slightly biased for sure. Batman definitely does not enjoy working with Guy or with Hal Jordan. Guy because he tried to usurp his leadership of the Justice League International years ago. Granted, Batman definitely got him back for that one almost immediately. Guy challenged Bats to a fight, got knocked out with one punch. With Hal, it has more to do with the fact that he has killed an insane amount of people, and although he got better, Batman still doesn't really trust him. Batman doesn't really trust a lot of people. Even Jon Stewart and Batman got into an argument. Granted, Batman doesn't seem to have any issues specifically with Jon, but Jon himself tells Batman off for disrespecting fellow Lantern Hal Jordan, accusing Batman of disliking Hal simply because Hal isn't afraid of Batman. Jon gets right up in Batman's face and states, "What is the Batman when you're not afraid of him? Just a man." Harsh, Jon, harsh. Number 4. Damian Wayne and Tim Drake. A lot of the Robins in truth have issues with each other, but these two really take the cake. Understandably, as Damian did try to kill Tim the first time they met. Still, when Ra's al Ghul shows back up and is attempting to capture Damian so that he can use his body to put his own soul in it, the Robins must fight together to fend off all of the ninjas that arrive to capture them. Just in time too, as the two were at a point where Tim was ready to beat Damian senseless, being quick to not trust him on his return to Wayne Manor. Even fighting together, they still get on each other's nerves and end up not being great at it, as they do get captured. Fighting with people you really don't like can often result in failure. Unfortunately, almost all of the Robins seem to initially dislike Damian Wayne, so none of them are really great at fighting with him. Doesn't help that he just is also out to just protect himself most of the time. Not a team player, but he's working on it, so. Number 3. Rogue and Scarlet Witch. After the events of House of M, Rogue was really not happy with Scarlet Witch, whom she blamed for Xavier's death. The two would end up both being kidnapped by Red Skull. Rogue discovered that Red Skull had captured them more to target Wanda, and despite her grudge, Rogue escaped and rushed to save Wanda. However, when she came upon her, it seemed like she was making a deal with the Red Skull, and Rogue went right back to the hate she was carrying and actually fought Scarlet Witch instead. Eventually the two managed to work together and escape, but when Wanda offered Rogue an olive branch and said that she wanted to be friends, Rogue refused. This was an interesting time for Rogue in the comics, who was pretty steadfast in her grudges and just generally moody. She even went back to donning a look similar to her Brotherhood days. However, whether Rogue liked it or not, spoiler alert, she didn't like it, she and Wanda were both appointed as part of the Uncanny Avengers team, which brought members of both the X-Men and the Avengers together after the events of an even bigger fight involving Red Skull, who had also acquired Xavier's telepathic abilities after stealing his brain from his corpse. I don't know how that works, but that's what happened. Charles Xavier's got some brain. Number 2, Black Panther and Namor. It's hard for these two to get along due to the fact that their ideologies seem different. They're both rulers of a nation, but one on land and the other below the sea, and their nations constantly seem to be in a state of conflict with one another. In a sense, I think the two rivals are just kind of jealous of the other, what they have and how they handle a problem. Both are a part of the secret superhero group called the Illuminati, which has gone up against some of the world's greatest threats. In the event of an incursion, the two heroes held a detonation button for the alternate world, in the event that they had no options left but to destroy it. When it seemed like all the other options had pretty much disappeared and they had to make that ultimate choice, their world or the alternate world, Black Panther could not bring himself to push the button, so Namor did. Much to Black Panther's shock and disapproval. Just another example of how they just can't agree on things. Number 1, Emma Frost and Jean Grey. That's right, y'all were asking for more Emma Frost and I'm giving it to you. The awesome thing about these two characters is that their rivalry actually transcends fighting for attention from Scott Summers. They are both each other's foils. Emma brings out the darkness in Jean. Around Emma, Jean's cruel side comes out, and she definitely has one of those, even though many other characters in the comics and readers of the comics don't see that. Emma Frost certainly does. Like, just after Jean found out about Emma and Scott's psychic affair, and Jean telepathically basically beat the life out of Emma within the confines of her mind, tearing down any defenses Emma tried to put up. Jean brings out the jealous side in Emma though. Emma seems to constantly feel like she's living in Jean's shadow. Both are telepaths, but Jean is often presented as being stronger due to her connection with the Phoenix Force and her unlimited potential. And beyond that, Emma is in love with the man who has always been presented as the one true love of Jean's. While Scott may have had more than one love, for Emma and Jean there seems to really only be Scott. Too bad they can't all just get along and be like a happy little love trio. We can hope, we can dream. Well, we might get to see something like that happen in House of X. Maybe, just maybe, though. Any other time these two have had to work together in the comics, it's met with a lot of sassy remarks from Emma, and a mixed bag of feelings from Jean, who struggles to be compassionate around Frost. Even when Jean saves Emma in the events of Planet X, Emma still has nothing kind to say about her fellow X-Men and Nemesis. Fire and ice, fire and ice.
Number 10, Wolverine. To be clear, there are way more people who love Wolverine than hate him. I think it would be fair to say that he's the most popular of the X-Men, and no amount of hate from a vocal minority will ever change that. But looking at the character through the lens of the haters can be pretty fun. In some of the comics from the 80s that Logan appeared in, he hadn't quite developed the nuances that so many fans love him for, and the medium had a habit of making characters very bluntly state their feelings. This resulted in a Wolverine who wasn't just a surly loner, but was always interrupting conversations to remind people what a surly loner he was. For example, in Uncanny X-Men number 139, the team finishes up a session in the Danger Room, and Nightcrawler goes to get the team some lemonade, and Wolvie mentions that he doesn't drink lemonade, only beer. And when he's done, he of course crushes the can in his hand. That's right, he's so manly that you can right off with your kitty juice. It's only Molson Expert for this tough, manly man, which, by the way, has the same alcohol percentage as a Mike's Hard Lemonade. If you're not a fan of the character, it can be a lot of fun to make fun of what a goofy psycho he comes across as. My favorite example of this is in Contest of Champions number 3, when the heroes of the Marvel Universe are pit against each other by the Grand Master in a tournament. Wolverine is put on a team with the Thing and Le Peregrine against Black Panther, Angel, and Vanguard. Wolvie immediately storms off, screaming about how he's a loner who goes his own way, to which the Thing says, Okay. He then attacks Black Panther. T'Challa reminds him that this is just a game, but Wolverine busts out his claws and tries to murder him. The Thing shows up and is like, "What are you doing? This is a game." And Wolverine yells out, "I don't play games." Like, dude, calm down. If you're one of the Wolverine haters out there, I'd recommend giving Old Man Logan a chance. It puts him in a setting that justifies his surliness more than some of the classic X-Men stories do. Number 9, Jason Todd. When Dick Grayson left the role of Robin, Jason Todd took over. He was a tough street kid who Batman caught trying to steal the tires off of the Batmobile. He took Jason in, and in an effort to try and channel some of his rage, he taught him how to fight crime. Jason's Robin was quite different from Dick Grayson's. He was prone to talking back and rebelling against the Dark Knight, and as a result, a lot of comic fans hated the character. It got so bad that DC Comics came up with a publicity stunt where they had the Joker beat up Robin with a crowbar and then leave him in a warehouse that was rigged to explode. On the back cover of this issue, they included 2 900 numbers that fans could call into for 35 hours to determine Robin's fate, like American Idol. In the hours that the phone numbers were active, they received 10,614 votes, with 5,343 votes wanting him dead and 5,271 saying they wanted him to live. Due to a margin of 72 votes, Jason was killed off. There have been rumors that someone rigged up a computer to phone in and try and sway the results, but no evidence of this has ever been offered. It's a testament to how intense comic book fans can be that they would have such an intense hatred for a character, but it is an undeniably fun gimmick, letting fans determine the outcome of a story. I'm actually surprised that DC hasn't done anything like this in the years since, especially when online polling is so easy to set up. Jason stayed dead for almost 20 years before he was eventually brought back as the anti-hero, the Red Hood. He has since become a fan favorite character, but it's interesting that if he hadn't been brought back, he would have been remembered simply as the Robin everyone hated so much that they had him killed. If you really want to see Jason shine, check out the Batman Under the Red Hood storyline, where he comes back from the dead with a vengeance. Number 8, Captain America, if you're not American. Captain America is a classic superhero who dresses up in the American flag and then stands up for American values across the world. Obviously, the character is quite popular among readers in the States, and his role in the Marvel Cinematic Universe has made him a household name all over the world. But sometimes he can rub readers from other countries the wrong way. I mean, a guy in a star-spangled suit showing up in your country and lecturing you about how you need to change your ways to be more like America is kind of uncomfortable. It brings up some imperialist, American exceptionalist themes that just don't play in the same way for other countries. It would be like if Guardian from Alpha Flight went into the States and started talking about the lack of government healthcare and gun control in the States. Many would agree, but others would feel like it wasn't his place as a foreign agent to talk about it. Same thing with Cap. This resulted in Captain America's first movie being retitled The First Avenger in international markets, and it's a testament to how well written the character actually is and how well he's changed with the times that more people don't take issue to him. Here in Canada, we sometimes make fun of him, but it's mostly tongue-in-cheek and with love. Check out the Man Out of Time arc if you need a way in. Number 7, Green Lantern. Hal Jordan's Green Lantern has been a staple of DC Comics for years, having his own series and being a founding member of the Justice League. He has a powerful ring which is able to create constructs limited only by the wearer's imagination. Despite having a passionate fanbase, he's also a character that gets dragged a lot by other fans. A big part of this is his various weaknesses. Some of these are misconceptions, but it doesn't mean they aren't brought up. For example, the original Green Lantern, Alan Scott, had a weakness to wood, so despite having a massive power level, he could be taken out by a guy with a baseball bat. This weakness is sometimes misremembered as being one of Hal's weaknesses, but this is a misconception. Hal's weakness is much dumber. For decades, the various Green Lanterns were unable to affect anything that was yellow. This resulted in some really silly moments for the characters, like when Jon Stewart couldn't defuse a planet-destroying bomb because the villain had painted it yellow, or when Batman and Robin painted an entire room and themselves yellow and taunted him while drinking lemonade. The fact that an 8-year-old Robin then beat him up and stole his ring didn't help GL's street cred. This weakness has since been removed, but more casual fans don't know this, and frankly, the damage has already been done. This, combined with a disastrous feature film that seems to be the go-to punching bag for its star Ryan Reynolds, has made Green Lantern an easy target for being made fun of and hated. And considering how extensive and confusing his lore is, I doubt enough people are going to pick up a Green Lantern comic to try and prove this conception wrong. If you are interested, you could do a lot worse than Secret Origins Green Lantern. Number 6. Superman. Superman is the original superhero who started it all. First debuting in 1938, Superman took the world by storm, spawning many imitators and essentially creating a new genre of storytelling. Despite his importance, he is often the subject of what I'll generously call think pieces, decrying that because he is so powerful he cannot be interesting, or that he is too morally righteous to be interesting, or that his costume looks silly with the red underwear he wears over his tights. If I had a nickel for every time I've heard this, I wouldn't be here making lists about the top 10 most powerful haircuts in the Marvel Universe or whatever. Superman is strangely considered both under and overrated by the fanbase. Personally, I love the Big Blue Boy Scout, who always tries to do the right thing in a world where that isn't exactly clear. Despite claims that he is too powerful, he regularly goes up against dangerous villains like Metallo and General Zod that are more than a match for him physically. Despite what some fans may say, the fact that he is so powerful and manages to stay so morally pure is what makes him interesting. If you're looking for a way to get into Superman comics, I would recommend checking out Superman Red Sun, where he lands in communist Russia and becomes a dictator. It's a fun Elseworlds tale that makes you realize what he would be capable of if he were misguided and how special it is that he's avoided that path. If you want a great take on his origin, where he's struggling with gaining the trust of the people he's trying to protect that isn't super dour, check out Superman Birthright. If you want a great Christmas story for the upcoming holiday that explores how limited he is even with his great power, check out Superman Peace on Earth, where he tries to solve world hunger for Christmas. He's not for everyone, but I think more of you are potential fans than you realize. Number 5. Jubilee. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not super familiar with Jubilee, but I do know she has the ability to shoot energy blasts that she calls fireworks. The strength of these fireworks varies from story to story, but I think most casual fans are more familiar with her from her appearances on the X-Men animated series than for her appearances in the comic. In the television series, her powers were usually pretty weak, and she was constantly needing to be rescued by the other members of the team. Add to that the somewhat whiny and very 90s dialogue she was saddled with, and it's not surprising that the general conception of her isn't great. Beyond the TV show, she has a reputation of almost appearing in the movies but being cut out at the last minute. Like I said, I'm not super familiar with her because her reputation has made me reluctant to look into her, and I'm busy with my Alpha Flight reread. But I will say this for her, she has inspired some great cosplays. I hear her in Logan's 4-part miniseries Wolverine and Jubilee is pretty good, so maybe we should all check it out and talk about it another time. Number 4. Robin in general. We've covered Jason Todd already, but a lot of fans are not fans of the idea of Robin in the slightest, and I kinda get it. Batman is this dark, brooding vigilante who scares the crap out of criminals while fighting a grisly collection of rogues who leave a trail of murder and mayhem in their wake. Robin is a small child with no pants in pixie boots who makes quips and wears bright colors. On paper, it shouldn't work. Due to him being so strongly associated with the 60s TV show where he was played by Burt Ward, and his appearance in the much maligned Batman and Robin, played by Chris O'Donnell, many fans have written Robin off as a relic of the past, which only makes the series worse. Fans love to make fun of his costume and the silly aspects, but I think they're missing out on a great dynamic of a stoic Batman trying to wage his war while raising an adopted son and keep him safe. When it's done right, the relationship between Batman and Robin feels kinda like Kratos and Atreus from the God of War franchise. Strained, but developing into a healthier dynamic across the story. If you want to see a story that is true to the characters but still explores the moral implications of bringing a child into Batman's world, maybe pick up Robin Year One. Number 3. Hawkeye. Despite having been one of the most consistent members of the Avengers and having been a major character in the various MCU movies and eventually getting his own television show on Disney+, Clint Barton is a lot of fun to make fun of. His whole deal is that he's an expert marksman who uses various trick arrows to take out his enemies with incredible shots. Despite this, it's pretty common for people to complain that he doesn't really bring much to the team. I get it. If he runs out of arrows, he's toast. If his bowstring breaks, he's just a guy. This is one of those characters who I think we make fun of because it's fun, more so than because it's accurate. I mean, Black Widow has a gun and some fancy armbands, but she doesn't get nearly as much grief. Batman is a normal human, but he's one of the most popular members on his team. This probably isn't helped by the fact that not all of Hawkeye's costumes have been winners, with the pantsless skirt look being particularly egregious. Also, Jeremy Renner, who plays him in the movies, is kinda linked to the character, and the constant jokes in the movies about Hawkeye and Jeremy Renner's own antics, like the Jeremy Renner app, make Hawkeye an easy target. If you want to give him a chance, chance, pick up any of Matt Fraction's work on the character. It was a massive influence on the Disney Plus show, not that they credited or paid him for it, of course. Number 2, George Clooney's Batman. After the parental outrage spawned by one of my favorite Christmas movies, Batman Returns, Tim Burton was taken off the Batman franchise by Warner Brothers. His replacement, Joel Schumacher, was tasked with making the franchise more family-friendly and toyetic. He pulled this off with Batman Forever, in which Val Kilmer's Batman fought Jim Carrey's Riddler, while also dealing with Tommy Lee Jones' Two-Face and the introduction of Robin. The film leans more into the Silver Age version of the characters and is wacky and weird, but honestly pretty rad. It's no masterpiece, but it's a solid take on the material. Plus, Val Kilmer is the Batman I can most picture having a shirtless sword fight with Ra's al Ghul. It was a big success, and the studio insisted on rushing out a sequel. Val Kilmer chose not to return, and George Clooney got the role. While Forever was a family-friendly film with some darker elements, Batman and Robin was pure camp, leaning into the 60s version of the character for inspiration and being designed more to sell toys than to tell a cohesive story. One of the most dunked on elements of this film is Clooney's Batman. He's constantly making jokes, can barely move in the suit, and perhaps most infamously has prominent nipples on the costume. I mean, so did Val, but they were much more prominent this time round. The movie was not well received, and it put the franchise on ice for nearly a decade. Clooney apologizes for the film whenever he gets a chance, and claims that he is the man who nearly killed Batman. But is he deserving of so much hate? It was my favorite movie as a kid, and personally, I'd rather watch it than BVS because I think it's a lot of fun. But I'm not gonna stand here and say it's some hidden masterpiece. But I'd recommend checking out the scene at the end where he convinces Mr. Freeze to help him cure Alfred's generic movie disease. He uses his compassion to connect with Victor and helps him rediscover his humanity. This is the only live-action version of the character who brings this compassion for his enemies to the screen, which is weird because it's a really important part of the character. So while he's still probably the worst Batman overall, he does deserve some props for this moment. Number 1, Aquaman. He talks to fish. Come on! Aquaman is so much fun to hate, due to his most mainstream appearance for years being in the Super Friends TV show, and the fact that his original comics could be really silly. Aquaman will never really get the respect his ride or die fans feel he deserves. Yeah, in the modern comics he can summon massive creatures of the deep, but I'd rather remember him for riding dolphins and hanging out with an octopus named Topo. The fact that he fights villains like the Fisherman, who's a guy who uses a fishing rod and trained dolphins to help him smuggle illicit substances into France? I mean, come on! Aquaman has such a goofy reputation that the movie felt the need to cast the toughest looking man alive, Jason Momoa, as the character to try and counter that. But as great as Jason is, it's still Aquaman. When I think of Aquaman, I picture the robot chicken version of the character before I picture the movie version. If you want to read some Aquaman, check out the trench run on the character, but as badass as they try to make him, it's still Aquaman.
Number 10, Wonder Woman and Wonder Girl. Now normally I would say these two actually really love each other, but today we're talking about rivalries, and there was a time when Diana Prince and Donna Troy actually had some beef. This happened actually before the two young women even really knew about it themselves. You see, in the Prime Earth continuity during the New 52 reboot, Donna was given a new backstory. I know, another new backstory. Well, her backstory initially seemed familiar to readers, with her being a child that Wonder Woman had once saved and brought back to Themyscira to be raised among the Amazons. The truth in this continuity was that Donna was actually created by Darino for the sole purpose of defeating Diana as a way of getting back at Hippolyta, her ex-lover. Darino in the comics has the appearance of an old crone because her youth was stolen away by Hecate's magics, which Darino confronted when defending Hippolyta. If that's not enough of a conflict for you between Wonder Woman and the formerly known Wonder Girl, who was in essence like Diana's adopted kid sister, we've also met Thea in the comics, which is an alternate future version of Donna who rules the world after killing all her friends, Wonder Woman included. Donna confronted this evil future version of herself in the 3rd volume of Titans in issue number 17.
Number 9, Hal Jordan and his brother, Jack. Hal Jordan's father, Martin, was a test pilot for a Ferris aircraft until one day he crashed his plane and died. He left behind a wife named Jessica, as well as his sons Hal and Jack. The event was so traumatic that Jessica made her sons promise not to follow in their father's footsteps. Jack respected his mother's wishes and became Coast City's district attorney. Hal, on the other hand, felt the need for speed. More specifically, the need to break his promise to his mommy and become a test pilot. Jack believed that the stress of this caused their mother to die early, and he never forgave Hal for breaking his promise. Hal would eventually become Green Lantern and would often work alongside Jack while fighting crime, but the two would never really come to terms together, and Jack eventually died in a car crash. Womp womp.
Number 8. The Summers Brothers. While the Summers Brothers have stood together in the past, they've also been quite divided as well. For this point, we're focusing on Scott, Alex, and Gabriel, aka Cyclops, Havoc, and Vulcan. With Vulcan, it's pretty easy to discuss the hatred his brothers have felt in the past, because when you think about it, Vulcan kind of came back to attack the X-Men and get revenge for what had happened to him and his team in the past when they attempted to rescue the first X-Men team. However, that being said, while initially Scott and Gabriel were not on friendly terms, when Scott learned the truth of who Vulcan really was to him, a brother, and that Vulcan had, unbeknownst to Scott, had been part of the team that attempted to rescue him and the other X-Men from dread sentient mutant island known as Krakoa, Scott ended up more wanting to reach out to Vulcan as opposed to fighting against him. Havoc and Psyche also have their differences. At one point, Cyclops left his wife Madeline Pryor, prompting Havoc to step in and be there for Maddie, ultimately developing his own romantic relationship with his brother's wife, so that's kinda complicated. With years of comic history between them and powers all based in a similar mutant power set, it's easy to see how sometimes the Summers Brothers all struggle to get along with one another.
Number 7. North Star and Aurora. Jean-Marie and Jean-Paul Barbier were separated early in life when their parents died in a car accident. Jean-Paul ended up in foster homes before eventually becoming an Olympic skier, while Jean-Marie ended up at a strict Catholic girls' boarding school, which was so traumatic that she ended up developing dissociative identity disorder, creating an alternate personality known as Aurora. They have a pretty rocky relationship with North Star, often coming into conflict with his sister's different personalities. So he's not fond of her Jean-Marie personality, who is ashamed of her mutant powers and due to her religious upbringing is unaccepting of her brother being a gay man. On the other hand, her much freer Aurora personality doesn't like North Star because he commented on her relationship with Walter Lankowski and implied that she was a loose woman. The result of this was that one of her personas refused to talk to him, but the other was constantly needing support but being unaccepting of his lifestyle. They eventually buried the hatchet, but there was a huge chunk of their lives where they were constantly at odds.
Number 6. Jimmy Hudson and Quicksilver. This might seem like a weird thing to have on here since most people only know Quicksilver and his sister, Scarlet Witch, and maybe their other half-sister Polaris. But did you know that Quicksilver has a brother too? In the ultimate reality, that is. Here, Jimmy Hudson is the son of Wolverine and Magneto's wife, Magda Lencher. Magda and Wolverine get together and Jimmy is born as a result. Quicksilver, on the other hand, is believed to be the son of Magneto and Magda, although it's also kind of implied that he might even be Wolverine's son, but that's a matter for another video. While Quicksilver had fought to protect Jimmy's life on a few occasions, this wouldn't stop the two from fighting one another viciously when Jimmy refused to go along with Quicksilver's master plan, and Jimmy's part in it. Magda, however, arrives to prevent her two sons from killing each other just in time.
Number 5. Barry Allen and Cobalt Blue. Barry Allen was an ordinary man until he was struck by lightning and doused with chemicals that granted him super speed, allowing him to become the Flash. But he is actually not an only child. On the night that Barry was born, his mother Nora gave birth to another little boy. At the same time, another woman named Charlene Thawne was also in labor. The attending physician was drunk and had sent his nurse home for the night and was unable to save Thawne's child when he got tangled in the umbilical cord. The doctor's solution to this was to take Barry's twin from the Allens and tell them that he had been stillborn. He gave Malcolm to the Thawne family, who raised him as one of their own. Malcolm's adoptive family was kinda sketchy, as they had a power called the Blue Flame, which they used to heal people before selling them fake cures as a con. As he was adopted, he did not have this power, something for which his other family members constantly taunted him about. Malcolm found out that he was adoptive and set off to find his real family. He began stalking Barry, even witnessing the accident that turned him into the Flash. He became jealous that Barry had everything Malcolm thought that he deserved and grew to hate Barry. He learned a way to use the Thawne Blue Flame power despite being adopted and became one of the Flash's villains, Cobalt Blue.
Number 4. Professor Xavier and Juggernaut. Professor Xavier, while having done some not so great things in his life, is still, for all intents and purposes, mainly considered a superhero. And honestly, while we'll be focusing more on the time here when Juggernaut was a supervillain, even he in the comics seems to have turned over somewhat of a new leaf, moving more into being an anti-hero if not like a full-on superhero himself, I would say. Juggernaut was given his powers initially by Sidorak, and while he has moved away from this god in the present day in terms of acting as his avatar, Juggernaut was at one point acting as such, with his powers intrinsically tied to Sidorak. Because of his alignment and because of years of history between the two, Professor X and Juggernaut would always butt heads whenever they met up, often even fighting against each other. If not always directly, many times indirectly at the very least. Even when Juggernaut became more of a heroic figure, Xavier was still wary of letting him on the mutant island of Krakoa, because despite being family, albeit step-family, Xavier still didn't want Kane around, and he used the excuse that he wasn't a mutant. Harsh. Fortunately, the two have continuously over the years been moving towards a healthier and healthier relationship, so here's hoping that continues to grow between them and they don't hate each other so much anymore.
Number 3. Martian Manhunter and Malefic. Alien space cop John Jones was born on the planet Mars, where he lived with his wife and daughter. Like all Martians, John had the power to psychically communicate with other members of his species, but his twin brother Malefic was born a mutant who didn't possess this ability. As the years passed, Malefic became more and more resentful and hateful of Martian culture and started devising a plan to end the race. John's idyllic life came to an end when Malefic created a virus that made the Martians burst into flame when they used their psychic powers, resulting in the death of everyone on the planet except John and Malefic. When a scientist on Earth attempted to make contact with Mars with the use of a transmitter, it instead transported John to Earth, where he became the superhero Martian Manhunter. Malefic remained on Mars, living in the ruins, until he learned that his brother was alive on Earth, causing him to set out to try and finish his extinction of the Martian species. Malefic hates John because he hates all Martians. John hates Malefic because he killed everyone John ever knew and loved. Fair enough.
Number 2. Aquaman and Ocean Master. No matter what the continuity, these two have always been brothers in the comics, and they have also always hated one another. Back in the day, the feud between the two happened because Orin, aka Arthur, got everything as a result of his birth, whereas Orm got nothing. Orm being Ocean Master. Because of this, Orm would end up seeking out powers based in magic so that he could finally triumph over his brother. Ha! Take that, Aquaman, I got magic powers. That's me being Ocean Master. In the current continuity, Ocean Master felt that Arthur would not be a good king for Atlantis and sought to prevent him from taking the throne. Arthur here is the firstborn to the princess and future queen Atlanta. Here he was raised on land, whereas Orm, his half-brother, is the son of Orvax Marius, king of Atlantis and queen Atlanta. And of course being raised, underwater, so he's more about that life. Being more of Atlantis initially than Arthur was, it would make sense that Ocean Master would hate Arthur, who spent most of his life initially living on the surface world.
Number 1. Thor and Loki. Okay, you all know the gist of this one. Loki was born to the king and queen of the giants of Jotunheim, but due to him not being a giant, he was shamed by his society. Loki used some really elaborate time travel shenanigans in order to orchestrate the death of his father and his adoption by Odin of Asgard. He was taken to Asgard, but soon became jealous of his new brother, Thor, who was clearly favored over him by the citizens of Asgard. This got to a new level when he became jealous of Thor's relationship with Lady Sif. Loki spent several years trying to defeat Thor, either directly or through more convoluted means, like granting a prisoner absorption powers so he could become the Absorbing Man to fight Thor. The two have had moments of getting along over the years, but more often than not, these brothers find themselves in spectacular combat, with Loki continuously attacking Earth simply because he knows Thor has a soft spot for it.
Number 10. Black Widow. Okay, so obviously I love Natasha, but there are some pretty terrible things that she has done, especially the ultimate version of her, and for that her character deserves some hate. Or maybe Mark Miller, who created the Marvel Ultimate Universe, deserves some hate, but regardless, someone definitely deserves some hate. Natasha has been known to use her feminine wiles to get her way and manipulate people only to betray them, but she usually does so for the greater good. In the Ultimate series, however, we see her get close to Tony only to betray him and the United States. And when Tony is genuinely surprised by this, as I think we all kind of were, she asks him what he expected. She is, after all, a Russian spy. Wow, I mean, someone deserves the hate for the way her character is presented, at least. Seriously, Natasha? Why though? She also kills Jarvis in this series. Oh, and her and Tony have a sex tape. Oh, Ultimates. Number 9. Jason Todd. So in my mind, all Robins have deserved some hate at some point. They all have a bit of a brattiness to them that just makes you want to hate them. Jason Todd included. While he has now been redeemed in many fans' eyes when he went off to do his own thing as the Red Hood, he was previously disliked by fans. He only originally died in the comics because so many called into DC to vote him killed, after DC left a statement at the back of the comics, letting readers know that his fate would be left in their hands. After he was resurrected, he did the same thing a lot of Robins have done that royally bothers Batman, threatened to kill people, and then actually killed some people. Granted, his focus was to kill Gotham's criminals, but this still has never set well with Batman. And he really hates when his Robins can't follow the Bat family code of not killing. It's so easy, guys, just don't kill. Jason even tried to become the Bat in Bruce's absence, and did such a dreadful job that the Robins had to fight him to take it back. Everyone knows that job belonged to Dick Grayson. Number 8. Midnighter. Midnighter is violent to a fault. His abilities allow him to see the outcome of situations, which he could use to avoid violence and resolve things as neatly and cleanly as possible. However, while he uses his precognitive abilities to win a fight, he actually immensely enjoys violence, which means sometimes he'll drag out that fight. If you think I'm exaggerating, you should check out his Grindr profile in the comics. Yikes. His gratuitous violence is part of the reason why he deserves the hate, unless you are really into that sort of thing, and then maybe to you he just deserves more love. The hero out of DC's Wildstorm universe was once married to his teammate Apollo. While we were sad to see the gay couple's marriage dissolve, it seems fair given how much of a jerk Midnighter is. In the comics, we even see a time where he walks out on Apollo after declaring he already knows how this fight is going to end. Not even trying for a resolution? Talk about undervaluing your relationship. Number 7. Captain Ultra. Captain Ultra may have been lurking in the background, but that doesn't mean he doesn't deserve some hate too. The only reason he is ranked so low on this list actually is because he is a background character. Other than the fact that he has amazing powers, everything else about him kinda makes the reader and the characters want to hate him. He is often presented as being cocky and arrogant as a hero. His costume is also pretty heinous. Beyond that, even other heroes in the comics tend to try and distance themselves from him. They usually aren't perceived as liking him too much. He initially lays claim to Hellcat when he meets her because he's attracted to her, as though she is some kind of object that, he could lay claim to. And he attacks the Avengers. Sure, he's part of Wonder Man's Revengers at the time, so it comes as no surprise, but his reason for joining the team is because he was jealous of the Avenger team and held a grudge against them after they denied him membership. Basically, Captain Ultra is an overpowered whiny baby. I hate whiny babies. Just kidding. Babies are fine. Number 6. Superior Spider-Man. Some people have expressed that Spider-Man gets hate from other Marvel heroes and that he gets some audience hate for his love life. While I would agree that this can be a bit of an issue for the web slinger Peter Parker, I don't think any version of Spider-Man has ever seen or deserved as much hate as Superior Spider-Man. Some may want to argue that Doc Ock's version of Spider-Man can't be seen as a hero due to the fact that Doc Ock himself is so villainous, but I would argue that Superior Spider-Man represents a merging of the two minds, and that his goal was to be a better hero than Spider-Man himself. Well, that and, avoid dying. From trapping Peter Parker's consciousness in his dying body, to the violent ways he decides to dole out justice, Superior Spider-Man has received a lot of internal and external hate for his behavior. Beyond that, he pridefully boasted that he was the best Spider-Man, but then could not even stop the Green Goblin. Also, he deserves some hate for punching Black Cat and knocking out one of her teeth. Number 5. Iron Man. Well, we may all love Tony Stark today due to Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal of him in the MCU. Let's be honest, Robert Downey Jr. is basically Iron Man. We also have to acknowledge some of his history, and it is some of his past choices that haven't always made him quite so loved by fans and fellow Avengers teammates. Let's go to one of my favorite events to lovingly hate, The Crossing. In this event, Tony was the bad guy after we found out that he was working for Kang the entire time. The Hail Hydra scenario before that was a thing. Either way, equally awful. His involvement in the storyline was also kind of beyond bizarre. What's worse is that this isn't the only time Tony's been presented as the bad guy. Nope. Let's not forget the events of Civil War, where he played Captain Marvel's role a la Civil War II, being the bad guy who sought to control and restrict all supers. He was also quite villainous in the events of Superior Iron Man, which explored a reality where evil Tony was able to shield himself from Scarlet Witch's spell to undo the weird superhero supervillain persona reversal that she had actually caused. He did a thing that any millennial would condemn him for: offered people a free app. But the app wasn't really free. It was just a trial period. And after it became crazy popular, it was an app after all that allowed you to, change your appearance, and the trial period had ended, it charged people $99.99 a day to keep using it. No! Number 4. Captain America. You didn't think I was going to let Cap off that easy though, did you? Just because he was the good guy in Civil War when he went up against Tony doesn't mean that he's particularly any better when it comes to his dastardly deeds. Cap, after all, has had his own fair share of hate tossed his way by characters in the comics. And outside of the comics, he does occasionally get labeled as a safe or boring character. And while I see that, I don't tend to find it particularly problematic for him, as the things people hate him for seem so ingrained in his being. Ignoring the whole Hail Hydra event, there are still plenty of deeds that have made other heroes condemn Cap in the comics. Let's take a look at some of them, shall we? In the events of Civil War II, he concocted a plot to kill Hulk, to protect the Earth from a simple, potential future. In Civil War I, he severely beat up Frank Castle, who refused to fight back after the Punisher killed 2 villains. What makes that really awful is that Frank refused to even take a swing at Cap, and rather than throw a few punches and just call it quits, Cap decides to beat him to a pulp. And then within the wheelhouse of Hydra-related evil deeds, he also killed his BFF Bucky. No! Number 3. Punisher. What's worse than killing a few X-Men? How about killing all of the mutants, including the Brotherhood, with a nuke, while pitting them against one another? That's just straight up cold. This happens in the one-shot Punisher Kills the Marvel Universe. That's right, if you thought Deadpool was bad, Punisher was killing the Marvel Universe before it was cool, in the mid-90s. Beyond this, Punisher has also been a character who has gotten a lot of hate as a result of him being too violent. He's often seen as a character that represents an obsession with violence and the belief of an eye for an eye. I won't lie, I do feel bad for Frank Castle, but what he stands for as a hero in light of the issues we face in the real world modern day make him problematic, and definitely deserving of at least some hate. Number 2. Superman. There are almost as many reasons to love Superman as there are to hate him. One thing his character suffers from is the goody two-shoes syndrome, similarly to Captain America. That is to say, he's kind of boring, good to a fault, predictable. Except for when he is not and is a complete jerk for no reason. Don't believe me? If you go back to the 50s and 70s in the comics, Superman really wasn't that great of a guy at all. Sure, he saved the world, but he also adopted Jimmy Olsen only to criticize and torment him. Granted, we later find out that because he'd heard a prophecy that harm would come to his son, but rather than tell Jimmy this, he simply is a jerk to Jimmy until Jimmy decides he no longer wants to be Superman's son. And sure, that was for a somewhat noble cause, but what about all the times he's tormented Lois Lane? There's a time in the Superman's Girlfriend Lois Lane series where he actually breaks up with Lois just to elicit and capture an emotional response from her, so he can prove to a film director that she should play herself in a movie about Superman's life. Wow. And let's not forget what the alternate storyline Superman Red Son teaches us about Superman's potential for evil and red fascism. Yeesh. Number 1. Hank Pym. You asked for him on part 1, you asked for him on part 2, and I heard your cries of injustice. Many of you have brought up that he beat his wife, Janet, which is also hugely problematic and reason for fans to hate him. This happened in the original Avengers series and resulted in him being kicked out of the Avengers, and Janet deciding to divorce him. As strange as it sounds, this altercation actually seems like nothing when compared with what the ultimate version of Hank did to his wife. After getting in an argument, the Wasp shrinks down to get away from him, and he assaults her with bug spray. While she coughs up toxic fumes, he also sicks an ant army on her. This fight in the Ultimate series was even worse and left Janet hospitalized, leaving Hank hated by readers and by characters in the comics. Number 10. Hawkeye and Winter Soldier. Hawkeye and Winter Soldier are forced to team up in the Tales of Suspense. Both seem to be on the case of tracking down Natasha, aka Black Widow, or someone who is acting as her copycat and killing off Hydra agents, as Natasha is supposed to be dead. It turns out that they are right and that she did die, but also she came back as a clone. Always clones. Turns out the Red Room made copies of her in case she was ever killed, and that they do this so they never truly lose an agent. This is that awful clone thing I'm always talking about in videos, if you remember that, in regards to Black Widow. Black Widow ends up getting her memories restored by a bear. Yes, you heard right, a bear. Natasha comes up with a plan to take down the Red Room, but tries to keep Clint and James out of it, as she knows they'll only get in her way. The two continuously bicker in this saga, and when Clint first runs into Bucky, he actually introduces him by confessing that he kind of hates him. Although it's odd because this is never really fully explained as to why they both don't really like each other. I guess it's because they both dated Black Widow, like they're both her exes, or just because maybe they're very different people. They both put up with each other long enough to complete their mission, and then pretty much immediately part ways. Number 9. Catwoman and Zatanna. Zatanna did a mind wipe of Dr. Light and as such had to mind wipe Batman because he ran in and tried to stop her while she was in the middle of it. Being a powerful magic user has its consequences. You can do great things, powerful things, but you know, people are going to judge you for it. When what she had done came to light, pun not intended there, Batman especially was pretty upset with her. His trust had been broken and his friendship with Zatanna had been ruined. Granted, he still wanted to work with her. When Catwoman found out that Zatanna had also tampered with her mind and as such changed the entire direction of her life, well, she was beyond livid. She didn't want to hear Zatanna out, who had come to confess and apologize. She wanted to just move on, and when that didn't seem possible, she wanted to fight. Zatanna says to Catwoman, "I understand why you hate me," but Catwoman responds, "Hate is a strong word, Zatanna, and it's not even close to strong enough to describe what I think of you." Woo! Number 8. Tim Drake and Azrael. Really, I could also include Nightwing in there too, as both Robins were not a fan of Azbat. Azrael took up the Batman mantle after Bruce had his back broken by Bane in the events of Nightfall. Bruce decided to leave the mantle in Jean-Paul's capable hands, but becoming Batman drove Jean-Paul to madness. Tim disagrees with the fact that Azrael kills criminals that he goes up against, and he says as much to him, which gets them in a fight. Azrael even feels bad whenever he loses his temper with Robin, but Tim just feels like he is a dangerous, ticking time bomb. When Bruce came back and saw that Gotham seemed to be fairly free of crime, I mean as free of crime for Gotham as anyone can expect anyways, he expressed leaving Azbat in the role and retiring from the vigilante life. Tim was amazed and confessed that Azbat had killed. Later, Nightwing also got involved and the three decided that Azrael needed to be stopped. Bad Azbat. Number 7. Batman and Guy Gardner. The hatred between these two goes back to the old days of the Justice League International. Guy constantly nagged Batman, who was leading the league, trying to get more authority from him, but was always briskly denied by the Bat. And one day, Guy decided he had had enough of Bruce's leadership. Guy thought he should lead the league and challenge Batman to a fight to prove himself. He swore he could take on Batman in hand-to-hand combat without the power of his ring. This resulted in what is commonly referred to as the one-punch event. Batman took Guy Gardner down with one swift punch to the face, causing Blue Beetle to exclaim, "One punch! One punch!" Ever since that day, and obviously even before that, the two have never gotten along. Number 6. Bishop and Cable. These two have worked alongside one another before, but the events of the Messiah Complex changed their relationship entirely. The first baby since the events of House of M with the X gene is born, and the race is on for all the groups to try and steal it. Two players in this strange game of Pass the Mutant Baby are Bishop and Cyclops. The two of them have different beliefs as to what should be done with the baby. Bishop wants to kill her, as in his future she grows up to be the one who kills thousands of people, which causes the mutant concentration camps to exist. Cable wants to save her, as in his future she unites all of man and mutant kind. The two beliefs on what the mutant messiah represents dramatically divide the two mutants from different futures. In the end, Cable ends up with her and takes her to the future. He names her Hope after his deceased wife, and she grows up to become mutant Hope Summers. No baby for you, Bishop. No baby for you. Number 5. Miss Marvel and Rogue. These two have been on better terms with one another lately, but their hatred was fairly long-lasting. It was also mostly one-sided. I find a good amount of hate in the comics between the heroes actually is one-sided. It's like someone wants to apologize and the other person just doesn't want to hear it. Rogue basically touched Carol Danvers for too long and ended up draining or absorbing more of her powers than she had intended. She also ended up taking Carol's memories in the process, leaving her a shell of her former self. Miss Marvel went to the X-Men, and more specifically Professor Xavier, for help, and they took her in and did their best to help her in recovery. This is actually where Rogue gets her constant ability to fly. Rogue eventually reformed transformed and joined up with the X-Men. She had stolen Carol's powers during her time with the Brotherhood, and she actually felt bad about what she had done, but also she felt somewhat annoyed as she had to live with a piece of Carol constantly inside her mind. The two women have since made up, with Carol offering forgiveness to Rogue after saving her. Though Rogue did try to absorb Carol's powers again in Avengers vs. X-Men, which did not land well with Carol, but then she became Captain Marvel, and now she's over it. She's got her own stuff going on. Now everyone hates her anyways. Number 4. Damian Wayne and Tim Drake. Two Robins that have had a hard time getting along with others. Ergo, it is unsurprising that they both have a hard time getting along with one another. In Tim Drake's defense, he did try to befriend Damian when they first met, only to have Damian try to kill him. Needless to say, from there, Tim was riding that hate train pretty hard, even going so far as to attack Damian when he first shows back up at the manor, announcing that Ra's al Ghul has returned and is after him. Neither one trusts the other. Damian thinks Tim is unworthy and does not deserve to fight alongside his father, as he is not his rightful son. Tim just thinks Damian is a crazed assassin. And well, I mean, he sort of is. Number 3. Captain Marvel and She-Hulk. After the events of Civil War II, a lot of people were feeling some pretty strong hatred towards Captain Marvel. Where Iron Man was painted as the bad guy in the first Civil War between him and Cap, Captain Marvel had now stepped into being the bad guy in Civil War II, going up against Iron Man. While Iron Man obviously had some beef with Captain Marvel coming out of the event after he awoke from, the coma that she put him in, the two had been close before, so eventually they worked towards patching things up. She-Hulk had missed almost the entire event of Civil War II, except for the one event that instigated the divide. In that fight, however, she was knocked into a coma. When she awoke, she discovered that her cousin Bruce Banner, the Hulk, had been killed. Jennifer was shattered and ended up turning gray as a result. She primarily blamed Captain Marvel for this, as the one who believed in using Inhuman Ulysses' visions. Hawkeye believed that Bruce was about to transform into Hulk and unleash mass death and destruction, and mercifully killed him with an arrow to the head. Jennifer was fighting alongside Danvers before the events of Civil War, but the death of her cousin shattered their friendship. Number 2. Old Man Logan and Old Man Hulk. In the dystopian world of Old Man Logan's story, Bruce has pretty much lost his mind. He and his inbred brood of children and grandchildren are the Hulk Gang. Banner's children were sired by him and his cousin, She-Hulk, apparently. Ew. The Hulk Gang are the landlords of the town that Wolverine lives in with his partner and their children. Bruce is no longer the gentle giant he once strived to be. The gamma radiation has seemingly driven him mad. He and his brood demand payment from Old Man Logan. Logan agrees to help Hawkeye with a job in order to get the funds he needs for rent. Unfortunately, when he arrives back in town with the funds, he finds out he is too late. The Hulks got bored apparently and came over and killed his family. Logan then takes the fight to Banner, who when transformed is stronger than he's ever been. He devours Logan, but Logan gets him back in the end, regenerating within Hulk's stomach and then cutting his way out, killing Banner and avenging his family's death. Number 1. Black Widow and Hawkeye. Okay, so we have to go to an alternate universe for this one, but it still happened. The ultimate universe is where we're going, of course. In that universe, almost everyone hates Black Widow after she turns out to be a traitor. She and Iron Man are about to get married when she turns on him and kills Jarvis. She was the one behind the death of Hawkeye's family as well, and the kidnapping of Hawkeye. Fortunately, Tony Stark had just gifted her a suit of armor, which meant she had nanite implants, and unfortunately for Natasha, Tony had control of those implants, so he was able to knock her out and have her captured pretty much immediately. While Natasha was in the hospital, Hawkeye had escaped his captors and he came straight for her. He shot arrows through her hands and pinned her to the wall before putting an arrow right in her skull. No one messes with Hawkeye's family, and you definitely do not want to be on his hate list.
Number 10. Fight Man. So Fight Man is designed to be a character that everyone hates. He's meant to be brash, annoying, and awful. His one-shot comic demonstrates this perfectly, which I mostly want to tell you about because the tagline is "one shot is all he needs," which is so corny yet memorable, it's infuriating. Fight Man regularly destroys the city, injures the very people he's trying to help, is broke, so is constantly trying to sell merch that no one wants. He had to move back in with his parents and he doesn't even appreciate them. He had 15 sidekicks that he got killed, and the whole city eventually sues him. So yes, the hate, we have consensus. Deserved. He's a terrible hero. He gets the job done, but at tremendous cost to the city. He also has Freakazoid's haircut. Fight Man is very 90s. He's meant to be a joke, and some of them do land. I think my favorite is when one of his villains comes down to the legal offices where he's trying to deal with his ex-wife, trying to get out of alimony, breaks down the wall and is all, "You better come out here or she's dead." And Fight Man is like, "Okay, fine, do it. So his villain goes, oh okay, let's just have a normal fight then. The 90s was way more self-aware than people give it credit for. Number 9, Guy Gardner. So Guy Gardner is a Green Lantern. He first debuted in Green Lantern Volume 2, number 59 back in 1968, and he wasn't always the brash jerk he is known as today. That happened in the 80s when his character was completely revamped from, well, mild-mannered and not really being used to a, and I quote, jingoistic parody of an ultra-macho red-blooded American male. Quote time. When I took over Green Lantern, John Stewart was the GL, but everybody expected Hal Jordan to come back and relegate John to backup duty once again. I decided that John deserved better. So I asked myself, why can't there be 2 GLs? And that led to, why can't there be more than 2? That eventually led to the GL Corps, but along the way I decided to resurrect the lost GL, Guy Gardner, who had been terminally bland and then brain damaged, a completely useless character as things stood. I was being a good soldier, trying to help my friend Dick Giordano sell the book, and it turned out to be the second biggest mistake of my entire career, because ever since, DC has claimed that since Joe and I didn't create the original Guy Gardner, our completely new take counts for nothing. But the damage was done. Guy was the jerk of every team he was on, knocked out by Batman with one punch. They've toned it down in recent years, but he's still considered hot-headed and a bit of a loose cannon, and well, rude. So it's understandable why some people hate him, particularly in canon. Still not over that him, Ice, and Superman love triangle. Lots of people like how Guy is because it makes him different. He definitely stands out. But when you need a hero, do you need someone who's gonna moon you and make fun of his allies who are doing poorly? He'll get the job done in a pinch. Hey, when you pull a massive character 180 like that and make it something other characters react to, it lands for some people and not for others. Number 8, Star Fox. Now whenever I put Star Fox on a list, people have strong feelings. And some people think I'm talking about the game for a moment, just a brief flash. Star Fox first debuted in Iron Man number 55 back in 1973. He is Eros, brother of Thanos, and while people didn't think a lot about his pheromone date rape powers at first, this would become a plot point. Star Fox would be put on trial for sexual assault when married women came forward claiming that he had been using his powers on them to seduce them. The panels are quite horrifying. They don't even remember, and he's all, you're welcome, he just banged a superhero. He's being defended by Jennifer Walters, aka the She-Hulk, but then she starts to suspect that he used his powers like this on her. And you know what? She's not right. She just has poor judgment. Star Fox? Really, Jennifer? But she has to Hulk out and get him mind probed to find this out, which also mind probing, that's a whole other kettle of fish. But what he did do was he did make her fall in love with and marry John Jameson. You see what they did there? This was a way to retcon another marriage out of existence. Comics hate marriage unless you're reading Sue. But wait, this was all Thanos' fault. He implanted a memory in his mind that made him unstable, and that's why he used his powers this way, so not his fault. Yeah, that solved nothing. And whenever you make a character a rapist like this, you give the next writer an impossible task. A curveball, because in canon the characters don't want anything to do with him, and outside of it, people don't really want to either. It's a hard thing to get behind, especially with such a weak sauce explanation. False memories from a Thanos clone made him do it. If the memory is fake, we cannot litigate. He's still being sidelined because of this. People get mad about people not liking Star Fox for this, because they feel like he was a good character who got dealt a bad arc, or also because of insert current year comics. Let's leave Star Fox alone for now. Number 7, Deadpool. So Deadpool is a fan favorite with many people, but in universe, other people can't stand the merc with a mouth. They think he's insane. He has few friends. But you know whose friendship he didn't have to bribe? Cable. He had to bend over backwards for Spidey's, but that is neither here nor there. Most people in the Marvel universe find Deadpool annoying at best and dangerous at worst. Deadpool can be dark and he kills regularly and is up for hire. Just because, oh, he was married and oh, he had/has a daughter. Kids are always just one reboot away from being retconned out of existence. Less so at Marvel. At Marvel, it's more likely they're going to be sent outside the timeline to be hyper-aged. Again, Cable. At different points of Deadpool's history, he didn't even have his memory in order. He couldn't remember killing. In his alternate universe stories, he's killed all of the Marvel universe, even breaking the fourth wall to come for the writers. He can be abrasive, intrusive, and hinder rescue situations. So yeah, it's completely understandable why other heroes and characters find him hard to be around. Even people that do like him need a break. It's why characters who can stand him stand out so much. And of course, shipping. Spidey pool is huge, bigger than Cable pool, even after Deadpool 2. I need more Cable pool. Their team-up comic before they get divorced is everything, and they call it a divorce, that's not me doing it. Number 6, Booster Gold. Booster Gold has had quite the journey in comics, and is, confession time, one of my favorite heroes. For a time, he was my favorite. Also, Heroes in Crisis did him no favors, or that Batman arc, The Gift, but I blame Tom King for that, not my Booster. He first debuted in Booster Gold #1 back in 1986, and was from the future, the 25th century, so actually the same time as the Reverse Flash. Fun fact. Booster came back to the past to pretend to be a hero because his life was falling falling apart. He'd been caught throwing sports matches, so he was working as a security guard at a museum, where he teamed up with the security robot, stole a bunch of tech, and went back in time to be a hero. But his real goal was to get famous. Booster was in it for the money and the fame, and he wasn't shy about letting people know about it. This led many to dislike him, and his untrained nature meant he wasn't the best in a fight. And he drew in so much press to them by always staying for interviews and actively clamoring for them. Yeah, Batman hated him at the start. But over time, Booster would come to take his responsibilities seriously and get caught up in some serious time travel shenanigans, and learn that, well, he can't just do what he wants, and the fame isn't worth anything without the people you care about. Ted Kord's death messed him up. But then Rebirth. Rebirth Booster is not okay. He's more unstable, he's less responsible, and a bit back to being almost basic Booster. And also, the rest of the heroes don't like him too much again. Poor Booster, he's taken back to base so often, and whenever he gets adapted, it's always straight up 80s Booster. So yeah, depending upon the era, the hate for Booster 100% justified, especially by heroes with a very defined moral mission. Number 5. Raven. So Raven has a very specific complaint, usually by other teams, not the Teen Titans, though it does happen. And that's that she can't be trusted because of her father, Trigon, and how she is a conduit for him. And also, she has been overtaken by her dark half before, like the time she crashed Starfire and Dick's wedding and then made out with Starfire. Kelly talked about it in her scary Teen Titans facts list. Raven is an empath and has immense power. She is a powerful villain when she gives into her darker impulses. So it's understandable that certain heroes don't trust her, and if you go evil, well, I'd be cautious too. I'm with Batman, like not to that level of what if I had to kill all my teammates, but if you went evil once, it could happen again. Number 4. Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers. You need to be specific, there have been multiple Captain Marvels, and Shazam was actually the first Captain Marvel. Go Billy! So Carol's introduction to the MCU was controversial, but we'll leave that aside for now and focus on comic Carol, Captain Marvel. So Carol became Captain Marvel in 2012. It was super recent in comic terms. Before that, she was Ms. Marvel. Her and Tony were friends. That matters in a minute, bear with me. When she became Captain Marvel, her character was changed slightly. She was made more aggressive and dominant, but the really big changes came during Civil War II. Listen, you don't come out of Civil War looking good. Just ask all the people from Civil War I. And Carol was pretty fascistic in Civil War II. She played the role Tony played in Civil War I, and people came out of that hating him. From commanding Ms. Marvel to set up essentially a teenage Gestapo, and also very much overstepping boundaries in the life of a girl who admires her to the point that she will lie to her parents and family so that she can patrol at night rather than do her homework. Also, she beats Tony into a coma, and this really gets people because Tony was on the upswing of liking him since the MCU revamp. So people liked Tony at that point. So yeah, it just wasn't a good look. But the thing is, in canon, just like the last Civil War, people just had to get over it. The thing is, Captain Marvel's a little different, and this is a bit more fan hate because most people in the Marvel Universe got over it fast. A few bring it up now and again, but she has like post-Rebirth, his coming back to life rebirth, not DC Rebirth, Hal Jordan protection. This happens when writers want a character to do well, so they can't bring up things that have happened in the past, their mistakes. Captain Marvel has been rebooted numerous times, at this point multiple #1s in the span of 6 years. She's ended up becoming a controversial character, and some people stay away because they just don't want to deal with it. I really liked her past arc with Tony where he helped her overcome alcoholism, but those days are long gone. But he's over it, he calls her Care Bear now. It's okay, Care Bear, I don't mind that coma. Number 3. Reed Richards. If you've watched my videos for a while, you know that me and Reed, we have beef. I'm a closet Fantastic Four villain. But Reed has done a lot that has made many in the superhero community side-eye him. He was on the Illuminati, that secret team that was trying to preemptively stop threats. He was part of that Council of Reeds, which had far too many evil versions of him on it for my comfort. He has a cache of some of the most powerful items in the Marvel Universe. Well, had. There was the portal to the Negative Zone in the Baxter Building. He exposed the members of the Fantastic Four to the cosmic rays on purpose. He helped build that alternate dimension prison for heroes who wouldn't register during Civil War I. Him and the Fantastic Four were put on trial for all the things they've caused. But, and it's a big but, he has recently been turned into Nice Guy Reed. You know, after God Emperor Doom and seeing his whole family die. He's turned over a new leaf. Seeing the Maker, the 1610 Ultimate Verse Reed, who is now evil, helped with that too. But he is Reed. His inventions and genius are calling. When people side-eye him, I get it. Deserved. Number 2. Hal Jordan. I love Hal Jordan, this is no secret. I also wish he had stayed dead. That too is no secret. It's complex, I know. So Hal went rogue after the destruction of Coast City during the whole death rebirth of Superman in the 90s. He also grew Reed Richards' hair streaks, always a bad sign, ended up killing the Corps and Sinestro, died in a quasi-redemption arc burning in the sun, then was the Spectre, then came back to life. The return was awesome. There was an emotion spectrum, eventually a Sinestro Corps war, but here's the thing. If you still distrusted him, you got flack for it in universe. Batman is treated like he's being extra for not trusting Hal when he literally killed the whole Corps. But what's what's happening with Hal these days? Well, he just destroyed the court, again, after he tried to arrest God and punched him in the face, then killed an innocent man. Green Lantern is interesting right now. They're all gonna be black stars, and it's cause of Hal. Yeah, I can see them being pretty mad about that. Hate, justified. Again. Number 10, Wonder Woman and Spider-Man. Now, I didn't fall and hit my head, nor am I just some fake nerd girl noob. These two met in the sequel, spiritual sequel to Spider-Man and Superman's first team-up. In their first team-up, they fought Lex Luthor and Doc Ock, who had kidnapped their ladies and also were planning to blow up the Earth. So this first team-up was Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man, and the sequel is just Superman and Spider-Man. Just them hanging out. It was bigger with more heroes and Dr. Doom flaunting his diplomatic immunity. However, at one point during this, Spider-Man ended up meeting Wonder Woman and basically his brain melted and he went va-va-voom, so much woman, and just hit on her constantly. Meanwhile, she had bought into the media hype by the Bugle that he was essentially a supervillain. And so the two fought, but they sorted it out quickly. He still hits on her for the rest of it though. I can imagine Wonder Woman being one of the many heroes who find Spider-Man annoying. So this is low, cause the hate was brief, bright, and then over. Mostly I just wanted to tell you this happened. It's one of my fave crossovers, mostly because Doom and Superman have a really deep conversation about the responsibilities about walking the earth as essentially a god. Friends, who knew? Number 9, Bishop and Gambit. So Bishop was really convinced for a time that Gambit was the traitor he was looking for who had betrayed the X-Men and led to their downfall and hence the dystopian future that he came from. So why did he think this? Well, Bishop was born and raised in this future and he was taken in by a man named LeBeau, which we know to be Gambit, Remy's last name. The man who raised him was also known as the Witness, the last person to have seen the X-Men alive. Later, Bishop would come across a recording of Jean Grey, who said the X-Men had been destroyed by a traitor on the inside, which led him to suspect the Witness. When he traveled back in time and met the X-Men, he came to believe that Gambit was a younger version of the Witness and fought him, and proceeded to attempt to warn anyone who would listen about him, and also just give him side-eye constantly. Gambit of course responded in kind. No one likes being accused of potential future crimes. You hear that, Carol? No one. It would later come out that Gambit was not a traitor, so these two would squash their beef. Number 8, Guy Gardner and Fire. This occurred during their time on the JLI, the Justice League International. So Guy used to be really nice, up until he received brain damage fighting Sinestro. When the writers brought him back, they felt they had to do something to cure what they called his terminal blandness, which is harsh. So they gave him a brash, rude new toot. But since it was the result of brain damage by comic logic, if he got conked on the head again, it could just be reversed. And that's what happened. Then him and Ice, the best friend of Fire, started going out. Best friend in quotes, there's some hints there about other things going on. However, when he reverted back to his now established Guy ways, she wasn't into that. But she felt that she had seen the true man and hence was motivated to stay with him, even though he frequently embarrassed her or made her uncomfortable. This made Fire not like Guy very much at all. And while he didn't appreciate her butting into his relationship, this would all be solved, including the eventual Superman Guy Ice triangle, by Ice dying. That's one way to end a feud. The writers would later go on to say that her death was a mistake, an attempt at drama that fell flat. Number 7, Black Widow and Black Widow. While when most think of Black Widow, they think of Natasha Romanoff, there is another. This second Black Widow is Yelena Belova. While she and Nat would become allies, they started off as actual enemies. Both of them were raised and trained in the Red Room, and Yelena felt that she was the one who should hold the title of Black Widow, not Natasha. Nat would eventually have to use manipulation to make Yelena see that being the Black Widow was not this amazing pinnacle to aspire to. These two would, as I said, eventually get along, but it was a really rocky start, with Yelena viewing Natasha as a traitor, and the latter seeing the former as deluded. I'm gonna introduce Yelena to the MCU, so I have a question. How many of you are Yelena fans, or even knew about her? Small random test sample survey, go. Number 6, Storm and Emma Frost. Emma and Storm have beef, and Storm gets along with Doom, so that's saying something. Although, is it? Lots of people get along with Doom. Doctor Strange stayed at his castle with him when they went to rescue Doom's mom, and they had a nice time, at least it seemed like it. They had a nice dinner. I want to have dinner with Doom. So when Emma was the White Queen of the Hellfire Club, she tortured Storm, trying to force information from her mind. Emma even pulled the, I don't want to hurt you, I want us to be friends. So obviously, when Emma joined the team and would later rise to a role of leadership within it, a role that Storm has herself occupied at points, the best points in my opinion, she would clash with Storm. Also, Emma gives her grief for being royal and is all, Your Highness? You were the White Queen of a supervillain club. These two have fought multiple times and Emma has lost. So you can write these two as cordial, but I don't know, I like their kind of drama. A little friction is fun, not everyone should get along perfectly. It's okay for some characters characters to not let everything go. Number 5. The Hulk and the Thing, halfway through with a classic battle. Many fans will remember these big brawls between the Hulk and the Thing. Fun fact, the Hulk was actually inspired by the success of the Thing in the Fantastic Four. Fans very much have a let them fight mentality. The Hulk freaks Ben out. Classic Hulk, that is, with how brainless and mindless he is. It's like looking into an uncomfortable funhouse mirror, because they are so similar. Early Hulk hated most people, Hulk smash and all that. But these two would eventually become friends, and it's sweet. Ben needs more friends. Friends who don't turn him into rock monsters. It's understandable why people still think they hate each other though. They just fought again the other day in a fight that made me cringe for the Thing. He got so hurt and it looked so painful. The rock part came off and it exposed his fleshy underbelly. This looked really painful. Number 4. Kitty Pryde and Emma Frost. Yes, Emma made the list twice. Look, a lot of people have problems with her. Take it up with them. This is again because of Emma's time as a villain. Kitty met her for the first time when she was young and Emma had imprisoned them, and she never forgot it and hasn't really forgiven. Kitty finds Emma to be cold, cruel, and manipulative and doesn't trust her. She's made sure that she can best her, and Emma is a little afraid of her. I mean, you should be afraid of someone who hates you so passionately and openly. But sometimes Emma has proved her right. On Emma's side, she's a bit colder about it, but it's hard to like someone who hates you and makes such a loud show of it, also rips your heart out. Their fights are really cool though. Phasing fights are always great, and then you add a psychic element to that and you've got a great matchup. Number 3. The Punisher and Batman. Yes, another crossover. The Punisher and Batman have met, teamed up, and hated almost every second of it, and I'm pretty sure you can guess why. They pretty much have the polar opposite philosophies when it comes to how to handle crime. Punisher's is, well, bullet to the head, and Batman's is reformation. Take them to Arkham. They can all be saved. I won't become what they are. This all came to a head when Batman actually saved the Joker from Punisher. He got in between them, between the Punisher, the gun, and Joker, and then told the Joker to run for his life. Frank fights him for a bit at first, but then just becomes so disgusted with him that he tells him that him and the Joker deserve each other and just leaves. Ouch. Batman on his side thinks the Punisher is unhinged and belongs in Arkham. Punisher / Batman Deadly Nights was a good read. Number 2. The Darkness and Witchblade. Yes, we're leaving Marvel and DC for a moment. I know, it's a September 26th miracle. I filmed it that day. What kind of miracle is it? Whenever you're watching it, it's that day's miracle. So the Witchblade is actually conceived as the result of a truce liaison between the Darkness, a cosmic entity, and Angelus, the embodiment of God's light, whom the Darkness resents for bringing life into the empty chaos that had been its domain. The Darkness would begin inhabiting human hosts as time went on, passing itself down through a chosen bloodline, always male. He would still bear the grudge against Angelus and manifest that in his attitude to those who wielded the Witchblade. Their confrontations are violent, dangerous, and at times oddly sexual, because Witchblade is, if you've seen Witchblade, it's a lot. It's an intriguing relationship that will span all of time, played out through human hosts. Number 1. Cyclops and Wolverine. All of you from part 1 were like, Sasha, Cyclops and Wolverine hate each other? Everyone knows this. And yes, they do. But they were on rivalries. But yes, this has crossed the line into hate on more than one occasion, and is part of what people know about them, so they deserve to be on here too. How do they hate each other? Let me count the ways. They were fighting over the same woman, yes, but that's only part of it. A small part. They have fundamentally different personalities, and even with her gone, they still fight with each other. Scott is uptight and wound so tight he could snap, and he does sometimes. He leads through countermeasures, so oftentimes as an opposing force rather than an inspiring one. He kowtows to authority and loves rules and order. Wolverine is a much more free agent, driven by passion, thumbing his nose at authority, and is softer than he would first appear on the surface. He also feels that Scott is a bit of a hypocrite. This is cause when push comes to shove, Cyclops is usually pretty happy to let Wolverine do the things that he can't. Here's the thing, these two can also be friends. It's a weird dynamic where just a few things would need to shift and they'd be a terrifying, unstoppable duo. So it's probably a good thing most of the time that they can't see their way clear to that.
Number 10. Scarlet Witch. Okay, so Scarlet Witch might not be as hated as some when it comes to the general public, but she sure has had her share of hate when it comes to the mutant population. In issue number 7 of 2019's X-Men, mutants even expressed their hate as part of a ceremonial rite of passage called the Crucible that involves revisiting her story. Young mutants who have likely only experienced what happened as a story profess their hatred for Wanda and call her Pretender. Pretender, pretend her! I hate her so much. They hate her so much, and I'm like, no, she wasn't meaning to be a pretender. And before this, Rogue was the one who led the charge when it came to the mutant community, blaming Scarlet Witch. Rightly, albeit maybe not fairly, for the whole M-Day ordeal and threatening the very existence of mutant kind. Number 9. Thor and the Avengers. During the Fear Itself event, Thor was struggling with his place in the world. He was hated because the events of Siege, while not his fault directly, had not only caused destruction in Asgard, but also in neighboring Earth residing communities. Many of the people living in one of the towns resented the superhero community for causing danger to come to them. We've seen this a lot actually in movies and comics too. Some had their homes destroyed and couldn't even afford to rebuild, choosing to sell and move out rather than stay and wait for the superheroes to attempt to save the day again and help them rebuild. Not all of the town felt this way, but then a coming war between Midgard and Asgard also was approaching, fueling some of the hate from the public in regards to Thor and the Avengers team. Of course, Asgard was only aiming to destroy Earth to prevent the serpent from feasting on all of the humans' fears and becoming even more powerful. But this only added insult to injury, as the serpent, was also already bent on conquering and devouring Earth himself. I mean, Thor recovered, but this was a pretty tough time for the Thunder God and a pretty tough time to be anyone from Asgard or any sort of Norse mythology. In the end, it was really only his self-sacrifice that managed to redeem him, because he died. But then he was okay. You know how it goes. Number 8. Silk. Silk is Cindy Moon. She has similar powers to Peter Parker's Spider-Man, including a built-in danger sense, but she can actually also produce her own organic webbing, which I think actually is really cool. Hers is probably the least gross, I think. She even sometimes uses the skill to spin herself a disposable silk suit spider costume. After her and Peter dated or hooked up for a bit, she ended up settling back into her own life and searching for her family. She had been locked up in a bunker for years, long story. Anyways, like Peter much later on, she also got some of the J. Jonah Jameson treatment when it came to her superhero persona of Silk. Though even Jameson himself very much liked Cindy for a time in volume 1 of her series when she was working for him. Number 7. Green Lantern. When comics made the choice to turn Hal Jordan into Parallax and had him basically threaten the entire DC universe, they also created a world of hate for him, with some readers, but mostly within the comic book world, and especially in the realms of the superhero community. Even today, more than 20 years later, people still bring this up in the comics. People are not over it. They're like, remember that time you pretty much almost killed everybody? He's like, geez, guy can't get over that stuff. Number 6. Spider-Man. He's a menace! At least that's what JJ would have us think. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of people in New York read the Daily Bugle and trust what it has to say. So when they do stories about Spider-Man being a criminal, a murderer, a dang menace, people are inclined to believe those words, which has led to a lot of problems for Spider-Man. And let's not forget the amount of times people have tried to frame him. Right from the beginning, Chameleon himself tried that ploy, and we've seen it happen a few more times in the comics as well. He's just so frameable, Spider-Man, isn't he? Number 5. Deadpool. While movie-going audiences may love Deadpool, not everybody does. Not only is he considered a major menace within the superhero community, who no one really wants to team up with, sadly, but his disregard for human life and his violent nature also make him feared by your average civilians in the comic book world as well. Number 4. Booster Gold. Although he does for a time end up achieving celebrity status, Booster Gold is still probably one of the least liked superheroes across the board in the DC universe, likely because his heroics all appear to be for the fame. This doesn't of course stop him from becoming famous, but once people find out that he's kind of a sham with stolen future tech and yet a man from the future with really no relevant information to share with those in the past, many of the public often seem to be finding themselves rolling their eyes at him as much as the superhero community does. So really no one likes Booster Gold, poor dude. Number 3. Batman. Now I know what you're thinking, wait, but everybody loves Batman. I would offer that more people fear him than love the Bat, and while he may be remarked as a hero by civilians in Gotham, this isn't always the case. In Christopher Nolan's Batman universe, Batman even had to go into hiding at the end of Dark Knight after choosing to take the fall for murders attached to Harvey Dent's descent into madness and transformation into Two-Face. Even though Commissioner Gordon knew Batman was innocent, he was forced to pretend to pursue him and publicly label Batman a criminal and a murderer. Batman himself understood the importance of maintaining the faith people had in Dent and in the system. To protect Gotham from devolving into chaos like the Joker wanted, the system and those who operated within it needed to be viewed as the real heroes at this time. And in many alternate universes, not everyone who has played the role of Batman has acted as heroically as the main continuity Bruce Wayne has. In the Tales from the Dark Multiverse series, we get to see a world where Azrael stayed as Batman and turned Gotham into an ironclad, fascist-ruled dystopian nightmare. And in this reality, even when Bruce does get the title back, his views and approach appear to be just as bleak and horrifying. It's like, oh, actually, maybe now Bruce is worse. Bruce got messed up! Yo, that whole series is messed up. If you guys want to read something messed up, go read it. Number 2, X-Men. Or rather, really, just all of mutant kind, even. Any superhero that is a mutant is automatically hated. Just for being a mutant. Why? Because racism. Although mutants were originally created from a writing standpoint to get rid of the nuisance of an origin story, explaining away any need for one with the simple phrase, they're a mutant, people quickly started drawing parallels between mutants and the civil rights movement, which was really heating up at the time. Although it's hard to pin down the exact starting date, a big moment for the civil rights movement first happened in 1955, when Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white passenger on a bus in Montgomery. The first issue of Uncanny X-Men was released in 1963, 8 years later, and people's minds started to unite the two causes, making the fictional mutants the parallel for all the real-world races that had experienced racism. And people's minds started to unite the two causes, making the fictional mutants the parallel for all real-world minorities that had experienced racism. As such, the mutants themselves have to face a bigger world of hate in the comics since their introduction, fighting the good fight for mutant rights. They likely have had actually more hate groups than one could even count. I don't even know how many hate groups they had. I know it's a lot. I could definitely list at least 10 of them. Number 1. Watchmen. In the series Watchmen, superheroes are constantly criticized. Originally, the supers actually had to agree to disband due to the public's opinions of their existence. Ozymandias' whole plan is to put supers back on top, creating a situation where they can be seen as saving the day, and in saving the world, after kind of terrifying it, bringing everyone together to create a time of peace. Part of his plan is even to make Dr. Manhattan hated by everyone to get him out of his way, which worked. That worked pretty well. Also, Dr. Manhattan is just kind of like humanity, what is that? But even Adrian Veidt's brilliant master plan doesn't end up panning out when Rorschach's journals are published, revealing that Ozymandias was the one responsible for the alien squid attack on New York. As a result, supers become even more hated and Adrian Veidt is forced to go into hiding. So really the Watchmen universe, just no one likes the Watchmen. Number 10. All the Robins. There is definitely a level of hate between all Robins due to the competitive edge. They're all working hard to impress Batman, and because of that, they all get competitive with each other, like a bunch of siblings vying for parental attention. It often quickly becomes about who is the best Robin, even when they are working together. The Robin War comic series has many moments of this, especially between Damian and all of the other Robins, as to be expected. Of course, this is also exacerbated for Damian by the fact that they are also dealing with a literal group of copycats who aspire to be like some version of Robin as well. And Teen Titans Go episode, Best Robin, highlights just how easy it is for the Bat family to devolve into petty feuds, like any family. You can't have family love without a bit of family hate. Number 9. Catwoman and Black Canary. Despite these two both being members of the Birds of Prey in the Batman animated series, these two don't always see eye to eye. A lot of the interactions in comics involve them making snide remarks at one another. And in 2008, they actually fought, although the hate between them was fairly short-lived. It was still fairly humorous and real, as the two faced fighting for their own existence and the existence of the animals that they share their names with. In the Catwoman / Tweety and Sylvester crossover, Selina is fighting for the existence of all cats, while Dinah fights for the existence of all birds. The two battle across the city and are forced to recruit other team members to help them out. This also allows us to see fellow Teen Titans Starfire and Raven duke it out, as Starfire is descended from cats, apparently, while Raven is obviously representing birds, I suppose due to her name. Catwoman even calls Amanda Waller for backup. It's a pretty funny comic, you should read it. Number 8. Wolverine and Spider-Man. These two just seem to be polar opposites when it comes to their philosophy and attitude on life and crime fighting. Whenever the two are forced to team up, it usually ends in torture for one or both of them. Whether they are swapping bodies or getting sent back in time and forced to live with cavemen and dinosaurs, the two always struggle to see eye to eye and detest one another as a result. In Spider-Man vs. Wolverine out of the 80s, we even saw the two come to blows over their different philosophies. Wolverine was trying to help a friend who wanted to die by giving them a mercy killing, but was stopped from finishing the job by Spider-Man, who had come across the two and couldn't stand by, not understanding why Wolverine would kill his friend. The two fight and Spider-Man accidentally punches the very woman he was trying to save when she uses his spidey senses against him, sneaking up on him and causing him to punch her to death. Oh, comics. The only place where someone get one punch to death. Wolverine to the stomach and then one punch from Spider-Man, yeah, out. Number 7. Emma Frost and Professor X. Emma goes into Professor X's mind to make sure there is no trace of Mr. Sinister and no influence over Charles. In X-Men Legacy, Emma goes into Professor X's mind to make sure there is no trace of Mr. Sinister and no influence over Charles. She does this for Scott as it is not a task she looks forward to. Charles doesn't even think she can manage it. Ooh, harsh. And yet, she does manage it, searching through Charles' memories and somewhat torturing him. She says she doesn't enjoy it, but she explicitly judges Charles while she does so, analyzing the way that they both see reality. The way Emma sees it, she's more of a grounded person, whereas Charles almost sees himself as more of a god or a guardian angel when it comes to the mutants he teaches. At least that's how Emma sees his perception of self. Although Cyclops often praises Emma as a teacher, to her she is actually only ever training students, and this divide between Emma and Charles causes the two to get in a pretty large fight while she is inside his mind. And although the two mutants can often remain civilized and respect one another, there is definitely some hatred bubbling under the surface. And it comes up in this comic, especially coming from Emma, as she doesn't really agree with Charles' treatment of Scott, the way that he raised him. You know what I mean. Number 6. Reed Richards and Namor. These two hate each other because of love. They both have feelings for Sue Storm, and although Reed Richards is actually married to her, Namor constantly feels like Richards does a terrible job of being a good partner, which for the most part is kind of true. But Sue loves Reed and won't leave him. Why? Well, we'll never really know that. Reed is definitely brilliant, but his brilliance often leads him into neglecting his wife and his family life. Namor describes their relationship best when he says, "You met her, you dated her a short time, then you accidentally gave her powers that forced her into your tower. That tower is a cage, created by you for her, but she has come to terms with it. She still loves you." The two can constantly be seen in the comics insulting one another and occasionally even fighting over Sue. Fighting over those ladies. Number 5. Misty Knight and Jessica Jones. Misty has never thought that Jessica was good enough for her friend Luke, and Jessica has never liked that Misty seems to dislike her for no good reason. As such, whenever these two are in a room together, things are bound to get pretty ugly. Even as early as the first issue of Jessica Jones Volume 1 Issue 1 from 2016, one of the first few pages actually shows Misty paying Jessica a visit after she has just got out of prison. The two immediately get in a fight as Misty has obviously been sent by Luke to retrieve or check up on Luke and Jessica's daughter. Misty says that she has never liked Jessica on a subatomic level, and that she feels she has finally been proven right. The fight ends with Jessica dragging Misty out of her office. Lucky Jessica didn't throw her through something, jeez, poor Misty. Miss Martian and Martian Manhunter. Miss Martian actually ends up killing Martian Manhunter. Okay, so no, not that Martian Manhunter. This version of Martian Manhunter is actually Miss Martian, but from 9 years in the future. The Teen Titans of the future have returned to the past to preserve the future they came from. The version of Miss Martian that returns has now adopted the mantle of Martian Manhunter, and wears the color of her true race with pride, choosing to appear white rather than green. Miss Martian isn't sure if she can trust her future self, but becomes intrigued with her when she notices her immunity to fire. When her future self prevents her from saving Robin, and her fire immunity is revealed to come not from her power as a white Martian, but from her future armor technology of some kind, she turns on this version of Martian Manhunter. Her future self berates Miss Martian's mind with visions of the future she has come from, filled with graphic images of violence, causing Miss Martian to snap and decapitate her future self. Woo! You know it's hate when it ends with decapitation. That's the border right there. Iron Man and Iron Man. I'm so sorry, but yes, we're going to the crossing for this one. In this Marvel event, it was revealed that Tony Stark was brainwashed by Kang a long time ago and was actually evil. Why he helped defeat Kang so many times? Well, that never really made any sense or was explained. Just get ready to put logic on hold for this Marvel event. In order to defeat Iron Man, the Avengers came up with a brilliant idea of snagging his teen self from the past and putting him up against the current Iron Man. That actually only made evil Tony Stark more mad, unfortunately. He whooped his teen self's butt, and when he saw that arrogance in his younger self's eyes, he abhorred it, and he almost killed him. Tony said that his arrogance was what had led him down the path that he was at now, and even though he was evil now, he apparently had some self-loathing issues. Also, that one panel of young him being so happy to have to have older him dead, but then he feels remorse later, so it's fine. He cries later, he mourns himself. Number 2, Batman and Spawn. Batman runs into Spawn at kind of a bad time during their crossover comic. Spawn was in the process of sending some bad guys to hell, but to Batman, who was not privy to their misdeeds, it looked kinda like murder. His hatred of Spawn comes from the fact that he thinks he is undisciplined and a murderer, whereas Spawn's hatred of the Bat comes from the fact that he thinks he's kind of just a whiny rich kid who is also just a mortal. Even when the two come together to face the big bad in the comic, they still part on bad terms. Spawn asks Batman if they can bury the hatchet after their team up, and Batman answers by burying a batarang right in the middle of Spawn's face. I guess that's a no. Number 1, Iron Man and Black Widow. Going to the Ultimates universe again for this one. As I said in my previous video when I was talking about the Ultimates Black Widow, no one really likes her. And classifying her as a hero is, not really accurate, as she does turn out to be a traitor, but before that reveal we all actually thought that she was a hero. So I'm gonna count it. In the Ultimates, Tony Stark and Natasha Romanoff become an item. The two even get engaged and plan to get married, which shocked a lot of people. But even more shocking was when it turned out that Natasha was betraying her friends, the Avengers and Tony. While the Liberators are invading, Natasha distracts Tony in the bedroom. But when he can hear the explosions from there, he insists they see what's going on and help out their friends. It's then that Natasha pulls a gun on him and reveals her true colors. Just then, Jarvis enters with breakfast and Black Widow shoots him in the head. Oh, Jarvis! Tony had gifted her own Iron Man suit for their wedding, but fortunately he still controls the nanites within her body that allow her to control the suit, and he uses his control over them to disable Black Widow, announcing that 5,000 failed relationships can make a man a little cynical. Yeah, that's a lot of failed relationships, so that makes sense. Number 9, Cypher. I know I've even poked fun at Cypher's abilities myself before, but to be fair to the mutant translator, his powers have been taken to a new level since his resurrection in the comics. When he was originally introduced, he was simply painted as a character who could help avoid conflict through conversation and understanding. Some brush this off as being kind of boring. But in the world we live in now, where the idea of a nuclear war terrifies just about everyone, the power of being able to understand and communicate with someone, of being able to resolve issues with words and resolve conflicts, is a praised one. Although being able to understand any language seems like an easy feat to accomplish in a world where we have the internet and we can study and learn languages relatively simply, Cypher's powers now transcend that. Since his resurrection, his perception of the entire world has become language. He even tried to decode the internet and can better understand machines as a result of his new heightened sense of understanding and awareness. You may think this sounds like a coder. But the reason why Cypher deserves your love, not hate, boils down to how he understands all languages and code, subconsciously. Where others work to translate or understand, he just does. Number 8, Squirrel Girl. Despite often being made fun of, Squirrel Girl still manages to be one of the most loved characters. Hate gets tossed her way because her powers are considered to be, subpar. She is known for her tail, ability to climb, communicate with squirrels, and strong jaw. Yeah, I get it. If one of your superpowers is that you can bite things real hard, it's hard for people to feel like you are that amazing. But Squirrel Girl is also super strong, and what she may lack in abilities, she makes up for with heart and cuteness, and ingenuity. And despite her powers being kind of weird, she always seems to use that ingenuity and her smarts to defeat a slew of supervillains. She was even offered a position at S.H.I.E.L.D. If anything, Squirrel Girl would make an awesome D&D player. She definitely knows how to utilize the abilities she does have. Number 6, Hawkeye. A lot of people like to hate on Hawkeye because he's kind of just a normal guy when it comes to his abilities. Like, is being a crack shot really a superpower or just a super skill? Or maybe it's because he's kind of boring, or because he's kind of just a less impressive and lamer version of Marvel villain Bullseye. But regardless of how you feel about him, he definitely does not deserve the hate. He may even have superpowers, who knows? He was for some reason susceptible to the effects of the power drainer in the new Avengers after all. what's up with that? Hawkeye deserves some respect for being powerful enough to garner superhero status and Avenger status without even having any powers. Not only that, but he has got to be one of the bravest Avengers. Remember that time he used himself as an arrow in Avenger Volume 1 issue 502 to save the rest of the team and take out a Kree mothership? Whew, talk about a crack shot. Number 5. Dazzler. Some may think Alison Blair's powers are kinda silly, in and of that they are basically turning her into a music-absorbing disco ball. But when utilized properly, her powers can also be insanely strong, which means that all the hate she gets just for shining so bright and being so glamorous is unwarranted. Dazzler was actually written in as a core team member for the X-Men when she made her debut in the Uncanny X-Men issue 130 in 1980. And only a few years ago from now, in the Astonishing X-Men series Volume 4, her fantastical sound-related powers have let her stand up to such enemies as the nanotech-controlled Banshee, absorbing and using the sonic scream of her possessed teammate to take down 2 Reaver-controlled Sentinels. Dang. Not only that, but Dazzler has also proved that she was cool enough to have her own self-titled comic book series. Yeah, which actually lasted 42 issues. If you want to see how tough she is, give it a read. In issue 32, she even takes in Black Bolt's insanely destructive voice like it's nothing. Number 4. Captain Marvel, aka Carol Danvers. When Ms. Marvel was promoted to Captain Marvel in 2012, it created some pretty big waves in the comic book world. A lot of people had loved Carol Danvers as Ms. Marvel and were loath to see her adopt the mantle of her then dead friend, hero, and sometimes romantic partner, Captain Marvel of the Kree race. Not only that, but a lot of people detested the costume and hair change. She went from this to this. Beyond that, the MCU introduction to Carol Danvers decided to skip right past her history as Ms. Marvel and decided to introduce her as Captain Marvel. The film also dealt with people criticizing the film's and lead actress playing Carol, Brie Larson's, social justice warrior undertones. But regardless of your political thoughts or your opinions on fashion, Captain Marvel has definitely earned the respect and love she's garnered from dedicated fans. She has been a core part of the Avengers team in the comics since the 1970s. She's proven herself time and time again as a strong leader on the team, especially during the Skrull invasion storyline. She was instrumental in the first Marvel Civil War story, fighting on Iron Man's side, and later went on to be a lead player in Civil War 2, which saw her take up arms against her old friend Iron Man, and she even won. Well, sort of. Number 3. Jubilee. First thoughts when it comes to X-Men's Jubilee may revolve around the 90s cartoon, as a helpless young X-Men not really in control of her powers, who mostly shoots off little fireworks. Because of these initial thoughts, a lot of people dismiss Jubilee, remarking on her as having lame or insignificant powers, and even are annoyed by her. But what people seem to forget is how fun and silly of a character she can be, and even underneath all that teen angst, how integral she can be to the storytelling side of the X-Men. She's resourceful. In the comics, she found a way to survive and live in a mall by using her powers as party tricks, probably why they are often presented as being stuck in a low-level gear. She's instrumental. She actually used her powers to defeat a group of Reavers and save Wolverine's life, and later sort of became his sidekick. Her powers are stronger than you think as well. Emma Frost has referred to her untapped potential, explaining that she could detonate matter at a subatomic level. In other words, she could create the effects of a nuclear fusion bomb. And she said that Jubilee was one of the most powerful mutants that she had ever met. What? Number 2. Storm. Yeah, I bet you're wondering why I'm going here. I mean, who hates Storm? Well, before she was considered a potential Omega level mutant, many people always thought that Storm's powers were somewhat lackluster. I know, most people when they think of Storm, they just think of localized weather. She can create a storm, sure, but not like threaten the planet. And there, you'd be wrong. There was a time in the comics where she was under so much stress that as a result, she was able to tap into the full potential of her powers. In other words, she created a global level storm that threatened the entire planet. She was even compared to the Phoenix Force at the time in terms of power levels. Fortunately, her teammates were able to calm her down, but that story served to prove that Storm really is on a goddess level.